I now call this regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order at 5:30 p.m. Please call the roll.
Ms. Pearson?
Present.
Mr. Schubert?
Here.
Ms. McCall?
Present.
Ms. Bennett?
Here.
Mr. Carpenter?
Here.
Ms. Haley?
Here.
Ms. Stanford?
Here.
With 7 present, we have a quorum.
We'll now take a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. As we start each board meeting, it bears reminding that the mission of Rockford Public Schools is to collaboratively engage all students in an equitable, first-class education for a changing world. Before going any further, thank you to Kim Pedersen and Aaron Hill, who are working behind the scenes to produce the board's broadcast via YouTube live stream and Comcast Channel 20. I also wish to welcome Superintendent's Student Advisory Representative, Landon Bakhta from Guilford High School. Are there any changes, questions, correction, additions to the meeting minutes? If not, they would be accepted as submitted. Thank you. Ms. Stanford will now lead the stakeholder committee.
Ms. Haley will be reading the script tonight.
Ms. Haley, I'm sorry.
Thank you. It's now time for the Stakeholders Committee portion of the meeting tonight. Let's start by showing our 12-month agenda. As you can see, oh, I forgot the clicker.
There you go.
So as you can see, we will be celebrating RPS 205 as well as our community partnerships and highlight our feature article on the 205 vibe. Our feature presentation will be taking place at the November 19th board meeting. Now it's time to celebrate the good things that are happening in the district. So, first, we'll be celebrating RPS 205 Cardboard Canoe Race. RPS 205 held its cardboard canoe races at Lovings Lake at the end of September. It's a yearly event where high school students in the engineering pathway at all 5 high schools create, build, and then race a cardboard canoe. Students from STEAM Academy at Haskell also joined in on the fun. Chief Information Officer Jason Barthel hopped in a canoe to race as well.
It looks like he's saying.
Good job, Jason. Next, we will be celebrating the RRAC All-City Meet. Congratulations to the boys cross-country team at Eisenhower Middle School and the girls cross-country team at Marshall Middle School for their first place finish in the Rock River Athletic Conference All-City Meet. Next, we will be celebrating East High School newcomers visits. East High School took 65 newcomers students to visit Anderson Gardens and Peak Fitness. They learned about health, mental wellness, exercise, and nutrition. Most of them come from refugee camps. The newcomer team believes it's important for these students to learn how to take care of their bodies and find inner calm to help them succeed in school. The students are from Turkey, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Jordan, India, Pakistan, Tanzania, Haiti, Uganda,  Kyrgyzstan, Chad, the Congo, and Afghanistan. Next, our PS 205 will be celebrates the Youth Story Ledger. The Youth Story Ledger was held at Flynn Middle School. Inspired by Denmark's Human Library Initiative, it's an event where 6 to 12 grade students from Flynn, Marshall, West, and Auburn share personal narratives with the community. These stories offer deep insights into their lives, experiences, dreams, and challenging negative biases, and they challenge negative biases and showcase resilience, bravery, and intelligence. By sharing their stories, students empower themselves and foster understanding and empathy within our community. This year, the Youth Story Ledger was able to expand through a grant from the Golden Apple Foundation of Rockford. Next, we celebrate our Academy Expo. Rockford Public Schools hosted the 13th annual Academy Expo at the Indoor Sports Center. This event provided an opportunity for 2,000 ninth graders to engage with 100 area businesses to explore potential career opportunities. The expo also helps forge a relevant link between student curriculum and future careers. Students will utilize this event to make an academy selection. Next, we have our Kappa College Fair that we will celebrate. Auburn High School hosted its second college fair for creatives, specifically designed to provide students in the creative and performing arts the opportunity to connect with colleges that offer degrees in their disciplines of interest. Students gave mock auditions and portfolio reviews to college reps in the areas of theater, technical theater, instrumental music, vocal music, and dance. Visual arts students had one-on-one meetings to receive portfolio reviews and feedback on their artwork. In total, 18 colleges and universities sent 30 reps and faculty members who met with nearly 150 Auburn students. There was also a more traditional style college fair with participation from the same creative focused colleges. Here we will be celebrating the Guilford High School roof replacement. From a Vikings view, check out the new roof at Guilford High School. Architect Richard L. Johnson Associates and contractor Sterling Commercial Roofing worked together. Sorry, our feed left out, but Sterling Commercial Roofing worked together to demolish 200,000 square feet of existing roofing, all but the Fieldhouse addition, and replaced it with a new roofing system. The project started at the end of March and was completed in September. There it is. Doesn't it look great? Next, we will celebrate Principal Appreciation Day. So Principal Appreciation Day was on Friday, October 25th. This state-endorsed recognition was first approved by the governor of Illinois in 1990 and is celebrated annually. We took pictures of our principals at our 41 schools and asked students to draw them for us. They did a really good job. Thank you to all of our RPS 205 principals. Next, we'll celebrate Gregory RESL champions. Congratulations to the athletes and coaches for Gregory Elementary School Team 2 on their Rockford Elementary Soccer League Championship. RESL RPS 205's Elementary Soccer League ran from September to October and had over 30 teams. We'd like to thank the students, parents, school administration, and coaches for all their hard work. We appreciate you. We are grateful for the sportsmanship displayed between the teams, the fans, and toward our officials. Next, we have our Middle School Soccer Championship. We'd like to extend a congratulations to our Middle School Soccer League champions. Risa won at the JV level and Eisenhower won at the varsity level. Way to go, Owls and Eagles. Next, we have our Auburn Pink football team. The Auburn High School football team showed their support for Breast Cancer Awareness Month during the October 4th game with the Boiling Titans. Unfortunately, the Knights lost the game, but Auburn's athletic director said, if we don't win on the field, we are winning by displaying something bigger by showing we are supporting breast cancer survivors all over the country, especially in our community. The team wore the jerseys again with their game against Belvedere. Next, we'll celebrate our community partnerships with Rockford Reads. Rockford Reads kicked off its 23rd year of at Constance Lane Elementary School. Since 2001, the Rockford Rotary Club has partnered with RPS 205 and the Rockford Public Library for the program. Once a week, community volunteers read one-on-one with second graders for as little as 1 hour per week at the elementary school of their choice. The program runs through the end of May. Volunteers are welcome to start any time during the school year. Please visit rps205.com for more information on how you can get involved. Next, we celebrate our community partnerships and our SOAR playground. A ribbon cutting was held for the new SOAR Academy playground. SOAR is an elementary education opportunity created in collaboration by RPS and Boone Winnebago ROE4. The new playground equipment was made possible by the Winnebago Community Mental Health Board and their funding with the half-cent sales tax. Next, we will celebrate our community partnerships with CSU College Preview Day. In continuation of the two-way partnership RPS 205 has been building with Central State University, the equity team will be taking 28 students across all 5 high schools to College Preview Day at CSU on November 8th and 9th. Students will have an opportunity to experience campus life and learn more about college opportunities at one of the Midwest premier HBCUs, including cheer, band, and conference performances. They will meet current students, faculty, and university leadership. They will tour the residence halls, student support services, and other facilities. They will also attend the Greek Stroll. Break out to colleges, the College of Humanities, Arts, Social Sciences, College of Business, College of Engineering, Science, Technology, and Agriculture, and attend a football game against their rival, Kentucky State University. Next, we have our featured post, 205 Vibe. Find out on our 205 Vibe why early childhood has something to crow about this fall. You can check it out on our website and on the RPS 205 app. Next, we have our legislative news and a legislative update. In legislative news, Rockford Public Schools received a grant award notification letter from the U.S. Department of Education in the amount of $300,000. The award is the result of an earmark request in congressionally directed spending from the RPS 205 Equity Department to Senator Tammy Duckworth's office to further enhance the Rockford University Education Pathway Program. The funds will allow RPS 205 to further reduce tuition costs and provide on-campus housing opportunities for pathway students working towards their teaching license over the next 3 years. Also in legislative news, on October 22nd, State Representative Maurice West hosted a roundtable discussion about mental health. It was facilitated by Dr. Kevin Thomas from the State of the Mind Institute. Various community members and healthcare workers, including June Stanford, joined the discussion about mental health services and availability that are available in the Rockford community. Next, we'll celebrate our 205 Leadership Summit. District administration invited the central office, operations, and transportation staff to its 205 Leadership Summit last month. Administration revealed the district's new strategy for success, cultivating leaders at all levels and strengthening the instructional core. This event inspired and empowered staff across the district, showing how each of them play a key role in supporting principals, teachers, and students. Next, we celebrate our internal and external board retreat. At the Stakeholders Committee, the Stakeholders Committee held the board retreat last month at East High School in the field house. We took a tour of the school as board members to see what all East had to offer. We were introduced to the instructional core and even played a friendly game of basketball where we spelled out the word core. We ended the retreat with brainstorming pathways to solutions and planning legislative priorities. Next, we have our board calendar. We finished with the board calendar, reminding board members of the opportunities available to interact with our students, families, and community each month. Please make sure to check the calendar on a regular basis for the most up-to-date information. Does any of our board members have any reflections or opportunities they've had to engage with the community this year?
Well, first of all, I would like to know where is my photo of the winning shot against Morgan, Dr. Gallagher. So I'm going to need that photo. Thank you. I had an opportunity to visit with the newcomers at East on last week. So I wasn't able to stay long, but they did a presentation, and I think that they're doing a phenomenal job with transitioning and learning the English language. I sat with a couple of students from Tanzania and Yemen. So they did a remarkable job, and kudos to Principal Parker and his entire team for having such an event where the community and staff and board members could engage. Thank you.
I would just like to say that the alleged winning shot and also my dunk was not posted on there. So, but again, thanks to everyone at at East High School for a wonderful retreat we had on that day. And just keep up the good work. Happy Principals Day. And again, if you have any events or anything that you want me or anybody else to try to appear at, just make sure you submit an email, and if my schedule allows, I will be there. Thank you.
I want to give a special thanks to the East High School band, the students who came out early on a Saturday morning.
They were from Auburn.
Oh, Auburn, okay. Who came out early on a Saturday morning to play for us. We appreciate that. I do also, myself, I do want to share that I went to the SOAR Academy open house, and it was very nice weather for one. I was not able to attend the ribbon cutting for the playground there, but I did get to see it that night. I was able to engage with the students and staff there, and it was a really good night of food, pumpkin painting, and games and reading. So I do appreciate the staff for having us there. Anyone else?
I just want to, really quick, because I forgot to simply say thank you to the stakeholders. I was overwhelmed with my winning score. But thank you so much for the creativeness and the hard work that you put into it being a success. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a great retreat. Thank you for all your work and to the staff that put that together. I wanted to mention, I know we'll get a formal recognition later, but recognize the Guilford girls flag football team taking second place in the first IHSA girls flag football championship a week or two ago. And so I'm looking forward to the report from them, and I wanted to just mention that since that just had happened. I'll turn that back over to Denise so she can mention her game-winning shot again.
Well, since you mentioned it, no, it's back to the stakeholders committee.
I was going to say the only 2 free throws I've made in my entire life were at the retreat, and one of which made it that I beat Dr. Jarrett, who I think played basketball, so I think that was very exciting. No, the thing I wanted to mention, I know we've already discussed it, was the story ledger. So Mr. Carpenter, I had the opportunity to go. Dr. Jarrett was there. Heidi was also there. Sorry for anybody else that I'm not mentioning, but oh, Dr. Reed, okay. So it was lovely. So students across all of our schools, you know, being able to share their stories. Some of the stories were so sad, and some of them were so uplifting, and I learned so much about the students. And I thought it was also great that they had a lot of family support. So different relatives came, siblings came to listen to the stories. And some students were so nervous at the beginning, but then you could tell as they kept telling their story, it was just lovely. So we asked them if they could do it every week, and they said that was unreasonable, but the next time it's held next year, everybody should make sure it's on their calendar. So that's all.
I did have one other question, nothing to do with the alleged winning shot. But for the event where the students are going to Central State University for the HBCU for those couple of days, I'm just kind of curious, has there been any outreach done to any other of the HBCUs in regarding track and teachers to the area? Yes, nod, head nods. Okay, thank you.
So I do want to also mention that we had the opportunity to attend the Kishwaukee division meeting about 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago. But myself, Ms. Stanford, Mr. Carpenter, and our board president, Ms. Pearson, was able to attend, and we were hosted by Hampshire High School, and their culinary department was able to provide the meal for that evening, and we were able to hear from our legislators at the event and learn that we do have opportunities to speak directly with our legislators about what our concerns are in our district and how we can effectively reach out to them and make some headway to get some of our issues or concerns addressed. If there's no one else, that concludes our stakeholders committee presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Haley. Mr. Carpenter will now lead the Performance and Monitoring Committee.
Thank you. Tonight we have 2 important reports. First, we will hear about the district's annual comprehensive financial report from Dr. Brown and from Baker Tilly. In this first report, the board will learn about the individual and combined financial statements conducted in accordance with the government auditing standards. The Illinois State Board of Education requires that this report be presented annually. And after that, we'll hear from Dr. Jarrett and Dr. Gallagher, who will present the Academic Performance Accountability Report. And that presentation will be one part of a 3-part series devoted not only to reporting on student performance, but also gaining a deeper understanding of how our schools are getting results and how the system-wide framework continues to build clarity around our instructional core. So Dr. Brown, if you can proceed with the annual comprehensive financial report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I can't really take a lot of credit for the vast majority of the work that was done on this. It's actually Jamie Murray, who is our Executive Director of Finance. She really leads up a top-notch team that really works hard on the annual audit, and I'm going to actually turn it over to her, and then she will introduce Mike.
Good evening. As Greg mentioned, I'm Jamie Murray, Executive Director of Finance. Tonight we have Michael Malott. He's the partner at Baker Tilly, virtually, hopefully, to present the 2024 audit outcomes.
Great. Thank you, Jamie. My video is not playing nicely right now, so you guys missed the opportunity to see my face, which, you know, no one's going to complain about. Unfortunately, it's not letting me share my presentation, but I can get started and talk through kind of the results of the audit. Before I get started, one thing, all the reports we're going over this evening are in final draft format. They have been reviewed through our entire process, as well as by management, by Dr. Brown and Jamie and others as well. We don't anticipate any substantial changes from this point forward, maybe some minor tweaks, but that is about it. With regards to the process of the audit, I guess the first thing to do, and to echo Dr. Brown, just want to thank Jamie and her team. They put in a ton of effort to prepare for us and to answer all questions and pull documentation for us and do all that in the course of their regular day. So to do that and then have us come out, do our work, and basically kind of leave a disaster in our wake, if you will, while maintaining everything else on the way, speaks to a really, really strong financial group that you do have. We aren't able to present here tonight and to issue within the timeframes that the district likes to see without you guys having a strong finance group. So thank you to Jamie, Dr. Brown, and Aida and others for all their support during the course of the audit.
Hey, Mike, we were able to pull up the presentation, so if you want to just go ahead and walk us through it, I'm on page 2.
Okay, perfect. So on this page 2, I mentioned that there are drafts. Again, my name is Mike Malott. I'm the engagement principal. My job is basically to make sure that the audit gets done to this, in accordance with the standards and to the satisfaction of the district, that we're meeting all the deadlines and requirements laid out for us in the course of the audit. But really the two hard workers who work the most with Jamie throughout are Taryn Guiley, who is the engagement manager, and Brooke Knaben-Hens, who is our in charge. Those two are the hard workers. I kind of get to come in and talk to everybody and present here today. So it's been a consistent team over the last few years, and they really have gotten to know your district in depth and be able to really dig deep and know how your processes and operations work. So overall, going to go over the scope of all the different things that happen in the course of the annual audit. The primary report, the big report, is the annual comprehensive financial report. That is your annual financial statements that represent the financial performance and health of the district for fiscal year 24, so the year ending June 30th, 2024. That is the primary document that is audited, pulled together. It contains the full comprehensive look of the district's financials. However, there are a number of other reports, and I'll get into the results of what we've done associated with those that are listed here. ISB does require their own version of the financial statements in their prescribed format. That report basically takes what is in your annual comprehensive financial report and distills it into a different format to abide with ISB's requirements. This allows for them to have consistent information from all districts in the state so they can do all the things they do related to that. Additionally, we do a deep dive into your federal spending, which is what we give opinions on the schedule of expenditure of federal awards, as well as an opinion in accordance with uniform guidance. I'll get into those in a minute. We also, in addition to the numbers, we also look at your processes and controls and issue another report. That is the report on internal control over financial reporting and other matters. It's called our yellow book opinion, is what we refer to it as. Effectively, that is kind of a look at how you guys do things and are there any risks that we need to report. And then the last report that's issued is basically another state agency that requires your financial information in a different format, the Consolidated Year-End Financial Report, which is required by the Governmental Accountability and Transparency Unit. So that's a lot of reports we issue, but I'm going to go into each of the opinions and what it all means, right? So the first and most important thing is the opinion we issue on the annual comprehensive financial report. And we do intend and will expect to issue an unmodified audit opinion. So if you think about the financial statements in the annual comprehensive financial report, that entire document is your information, your numbers. We help prepare it in the prescribed formats, but it's really you as the district, as the governing body, as management, presenting your financial performance and your financial health as of June 30th, 2024 to the public and any users of the financial statements. The only thing that really truly comes from us kind of in our voice, if you will, as the auditors, is that audit opinion. So that unmodified audit opinion is basically a clean opinion. It says that we're giving you the highest level of assurance we can provide in accordance with our standards. That doesn't mean every dollar is to the penny or to the dollar, but it does mean that information can be relied upon. They have a clean, clear understanding of where the district's financial health and position is as of the year end, and can be relied upon by you as the board and by other users to understand kind of where the district is at and what happened during the year. In addition to that opinion we issue on the annual comprehensive financial report, that kind of drives a lot of the other opinions on those other reports. They're called in relation to reports. And long story short, that means we compare the information in these other reports, the ISB annual financial report, the schedule of expenditure of federal awards, and the cipher, which is the GATA requirement. Those three, we make sure that that information, those report, is consistent with what's in the annual comprehensive financial report. In addition, with the ISB report, there's also elements of compliance we audit associated with that, and that issue a clean opinion on that as well. So while we have not finalized our testing on the CFA or the cipher, those will be finalized. Those usually come after the fact. Those will be finalized in December. We do anticipate, based upon the review and testing we've done so far on the CFA and what will come to the cipher, we'll be issuing clean opinions on those as well when they are issued. The next report we issue is a report on internal controls, our gas or yellow book opinion. Effectively what that is, as I mentioned earlier, it's our evaluation of your key controls and processes. So we don't look at every process and everything you do, but we do identify the transactions and operations that happen on a high volume, a consistent basis that, due to the nature of a school district, present the greatest risk. And what we do is we make sure that the district has put controls in place to ensure that things are operating smoothly, making sure one individual doesn't have too much control, making sure there are approvals and reviews and eyes on things. Things of that nature. That reports go to you as the board that we would expect in an ideal environment. We do that work from a utopian view. We don't consider limitations on resources or personnel or anything. We have to evaluate that with the idea of no boundaries, in terms of those limitations. We can't consider those. So the fact that the district, we are not reporting any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, which represent risks or gaps in your control structure. We're basically giving you a clean bill of health on those controls. It means that you guys have a really sound system of processes and controls in place to ensure that your financial information is secure, and that while risk always exists, you have done what is necessary to mitigate that risk in those key processes, which is great. I mean, most districts we provide findings to. I'd say a good 75% of them will get some sort of finding or communication related to increased risk, and you are one of the few that do not. So that is a testament to your guys' operations and your process that you have in place. Additionally, we also point out that there's no non-compliance with laws and regulations that we identified during the course of the audit. Now, the next section relates to our single audit, which is our test of your federal spending. Now, that testing is in progress right now. We will issue that report in December. That deadline is a little extended by the federal government as compared to what is required for the financial statements. So that testing is in progress as we speak, and we anticipate issuing in December, maybe even earlier, depending on how quickly we can get through certain things. The two programs will be testing this year are the Education Stabilization Fund, which is your ESSER funding. And as that begins to wind down, there's significant spend there in fiscal year 24 that we'll be testing, as well as the child nutrition clusters. That includes your natural school lunch program and breakfast program as well. So there's actually a couple different programs that has to be tested together. We currently don't anticipate any findings over compliance or internal control based on testing we've done so far. That is obviously not, our work is not finalized there, but based upon the work we've conducted, we don't anticipate anything. That is a substantial amount of your federal expenditures in fiscal year 24 that we will be testing between those two programs. And as the ESSER money runs out, we'll start rotating other programs and testing different programs in the future. So there's kind of a rotation so that the big programs don't go untouched for a long period of time. But while that work is still being conducted, we don't anticipate any findings. Lastly, all those deliverable reports we've talked about so far represent different ways of reporting information, whether it be the district as a whole or certain segmentations of it, like the federal spending, and us giving opinions on that on the district's information. The other report that gets issued is the results and insights letter that comes purely from us as the auditors to you as the governing body. What that letter represents is a summarization or a culmination of a wide assortment of required communications in accordance with the audit standards. Effectively, what it says is we need to communicate to you how the audit went. Did everything go according to plan? Did we identify any risks? Or were there any problems during the course of the audit? I always like to say that when this letter is boring, that's a good sign. That means things went well. This letter is not designed to give kudos or to say things went well. It's designed to say, hey, here's where there's a problem. So when the letter has something interesting in there, that's not good. What's great for me to report is that your letter is very boring, which means that things went according to plan. As they note here, there were no issues during the course of that, no difficulties getting information, no disagreements with management, no non-compliance matters, as well as any other assortment of items that we would be required to report to you. Effectively, the audit went according to plan and with the expectations of what we anticipated given our understanding of the district's operations and the risks that you face in your operations on a day-to-day basis. So that is fantastic. In addition to that letter, in the electronic version, there is going to be a link to our governing body resource page that's specifically designed for board members, not just for school districts, but for all governmental entities. So some of that information can be thrown aside, but there is good information related to governance and a number of different topics that might be of interest to you as board members. So if you're ever interested, take a peek. They rotate that information on a regular basis. It includes articles, some webinars, odds and ends, and a whole assortment of things that we have people working on a continual basis to ensure that is updated and has current information on hot topics and a whole wide array of things, many of which way outside of my lane. But it is good information if you're ever interested. Lastly, we do intend to finalize the issuance of the annual comprehensive financial report and all the assorted reports with that for ISB as at the conclusion of the board meeting on the 19th when we do get approval on the report. The single audit will be completed in December along with the the consolidated year-end financial report. Those two reports always get issued after the financial statements, but we do anticipate issuance in accordance, I believe, on November 19th when the board meets again to approve the audit itself. With that, thank you again for your time this evening. I guess, does anybody have any questions?
Doesn't look like any members have any questions. Thank you very much for your report.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right, thank you. And I'll be turning it over to Dr. Jarrett now, who will kick off the report on student performance. There's a lot to celebrate in this year's data, including an increase in graduation rate and schools with remarkable growth, like Haskell Elementary. Dr. Jarrett, if you can start that presentation, thank you.
As Mr. Carpenter pointed out, this is the beginning of a longer conversation. Each year, the state ends the embargo on student information on the 23-24 school year. Usually it's a day or two before Halloween. A few times it's actually been on Halloween. So this is always the season that we are able to release this, but our staff has been working for months to finalize all of these data points to ensure that they're accurate in partnership with the state. One thing that is relatively consistent with the state of Illinois is when they build the accountability system, it is ultimately the district submits data to the state and the state audits that information and ensures there's consistency and accuracy across the state. So this first meeting today, we really wanted to break this into 3 chunks, as Mr. Carpenter pointed out, is really going to be heavily focused on how the state sees us. We're going to be looking at things like state designations. We're going to be look at how we compare to other large districts in the state. We are going to be looking at our performance in many key academic areas. And Dr. Gallagher is going to cover the majority of that. What I want to ground us in are 2 parts of the work that I think are extremely important. One is that we really believe that the key of this work and improving is in the classroom. And there are really 3 fundamental interactions that are taking place in the center of that circle there: teachers, content, and students. When we have supported teachers with the conditions and the content that they need to be successful, when students are highly engaged, and when the content is grade level and appropriate, we believe that all students can learn at high levels. But that also means that everyone has a job to do in the district. And one of the things we are really focused on is ensuring that we have a job to support principals at the school level so that they can support that classroom, because they are most directly in that position to do so. The district office has important jobs like creating learning conditions and at times providing direct services. And our community partners also have a job to do, and they can help us as well. So we're going to continue to focus that everyone has a job to do to ensure that that instructional core is where it needs to be in our district, and that we provide students, teachers, and the proper content. This is also ultimately grounded in our vision for equity in the district, and that is that we really want to continue to work to ensure that you are seeing over time the elimination of predictable outcomes by zip code. When you look at national statistics in education, a pattern plays out that often race is a predictor for academic performance, and often socioeconomic status or zip code, where people or students and their families live, can be very highly predictive of outcomes. So one of the things we're going to be consistently highlighting is not only how did all of our schools and students do, but also are we seeing some examples where we are eliminating that predictability? Are we seeing improvements by race? Are we seeing improvements in schools that are in a zip code that has not historically performed as well? Because we believe all children can learn at high levels if we create the conditions for that success. So as a district, that continues to be something the board has asked us to emphasize, and we will continue to emphasize, which is eliminating that predictability by zip code. One portion of the work that we want to highlight, and this is just the very highest level of the work, the board set targets in a few key areas. One being to really engage our early childhood and early literacy work, the third grade reading mark, and having a goal of improving that to 20% on the state scorecard. The second goal was tied to establishing a middle school on track rate and then growing that to 85%. And then finally, both the freshman and on track rate and the high school graduation rate. So a quick update overall, and Dr. Gallagher is going to provide much more detail about the work. We did see 1 point of improvement from a score of 17% to 18% from 23 to 24. From when we started the work, we were at 15%, so we are 3 points higher than when we started. The middle school on track has gone from 76 to 82, and then the high school on track rate dipped by 1 point from 75 to 74. We had hit the target 2 consecutive years and went 1 point below that this year. And then the graduation rate, which started at 66% when we started the work, is now at 74%. One thing that is also important to highlight, a big shout out, our 3rd through 8th grade reading went from 19% to 23% meets or exceeds. So we're seeing some real overall district literacy improvements. And again, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Gallagher to talk about the details. So you can expect seeing how we performed compared to other districts in the state and how we performed in a number of key metrics, including the state designation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Gallagher.
I thought we were going to be able to leave that game of core there at East. I thought we were done with that. So thank you for the emasculation one more time. Okay, as we jump into the state report cards, I want to clarify this. There's a lot of data. There's a lot of charts and tables that you could get lost in if you visit the Illinois report card website. If you were to download the entire Rockford Public School 205 report card, it would be 200 plus pages. And likewise, if you were to download all the business rules that go into the calculations for all the metrics, that's another 170 pages. What I'm hoping to achieve here tonight with you all is to give a very high level overview. We will look at performance for our schools that are K through 8 because they have the same metrics that they're held to by the state. We'll pause and I'll open it up for some questions. We'll then go through the high school performance, which is a different set of metrics. pause, open it up to questions for you, and then look at a overarching district, how is our performance, and then again, open it up to questions for you. In addition, at the end of my presentation, our accountability department has also printed out handouts that I'll give to each of you that go more in depth, school by school, on their performance on the report card. When we come together at our next board meeting on the 19th, we'll be going in depth on our system-wide framework and how that serves as the lead indicators to the lag indicators that are the state report card. If you look at our state report card, we're getting it at the end of October, almost the end of first quarter for last year, right? Getting that information at this point in time, it's like an autopsy. There's not much that we can do with that information. That's why we have the system-wide framework with our standards of practice and our standards of service that allows us to real-time look at student performance, look at how the schools are doing so that we can adjust and pivot as needed for our students. Then in December, we'll have a board retreat. When we have that board retreat, that'll be an opportunity to go even further into our school's performance with their summative designations and their state report cards. And we'll be able to hear firsthand from some principals what their school improvement journey has been at their schools. And then lastly, I would also like to add, I have had a couple of board members reach out to be able to have some one-on-one meetings with myself, or it could be 2-in-1 meetings, so that as you look at the handout that I provided, as you're going through these slides, any questions that you have, we would be able to take the time to really go more deeply into the school performance with all of this. So with our elementary and middle schools, high level, we had 7 schools that moved to a higher designation with the State Board of Education. All of our zone middle schools saw growth in both literacy and math. And we had 10 elementary schools that achieved full points in terms of the growth points that they get on their report cards. And so before we dive in, I want to make sure that we're taking a very clear distinction between proficiency and growth. When we look at our K-8 schools, 25% of their score is weighted on proficiency. That's, are they meeting grade level expectations? That's proficiency. A whole 50% of how they're scored is growth. Are they growing their students' academic performance at a rate that outpaces their peers in other schools throughout Illinois? This is what that breakdown looks like in a pie. So you can see again, 25% proficiency, 50% growth. And then you also have chronic absenteeism and the 5 essentials survey playing into another 25%. You'll see a number of graphs that look similar to this. This is English language arts proficiency, grades 3 through 8. So again, proficiency, what percentage of students are meeting their grade level standards? The gray bars represent the percentage at the state level, the state average. The thicker purple bar represents Rockford's performance. And then you can see that's disaggregated by subgroup performance. And as we go through these charts, what you'll see, the overarching theme is we are headed in the right direction, but we certainly still have work to do, specifically as it relates to our African American students, our children with disabilities, and our English language learners. Here you can see we have a host of schools, grades 3 through 8, that had 5% or greater growth in the number of students hitting proficiency. Carlson with a whopping 20%. Here is our math proficiency, trending in the right direction, but significant work to do to accelerate the growth for many of our subgroups. And here are those schools that had 5% or higher growth in terms of the number of students meeting proficiency in math. And then this slide is breaking down how we performed in English language arts and math proficiency benchmarked to other similarly situated districts across the state. When you look at how 2024 is highlighted for English language arts and math, you can see that on the right-hand side of those numbers, there's green or gray. What that's showing is that those districts, if they're green, had grown from the prior year's performance, or if they're gray, they were flat. If you see red, like subsequent sides, that means their performance dipped. So you can see that just as the state improved here with proficiency, So did RPS, and so did a majority of the other districts that we benchmark with. Here, you can see across all of our K-8 schools, how did they grow their students in school year 23 versus school year 24? And so what this is showing you, if you see a blue bar that is filled in, that is showing their growth. And as they get closer to that max points line, that's demonstrating the higher up your bar is going, the faster you are outpacing other students in other districts relative to our students' performance. And so what you can take away here is that the great majority of our schools have blue bars. The ones that are empty would be the schools where their performance had dipped from school year 23 to 24. On the right-hand side there, you can see the schools with notable growth that are also highlighted in that chart. Similar graph for math growth. So you can see, as an example, we have Rolling Green or Haskell. Those are schools where they did so well in growing their students' performance relative to other students in the state that they completely maxed out the amount of points that they could get on their report card. They got, for that 50% of their report card, they got all the points. Looking at our K-8 schools as it relates to Illinois' designations, we have 2 schools that are exemplary status. That is the schools that achieve the top 10% in terms of their summative score across all schools in Illinois. Commendable schools, we have 10 there. Those are schools that are not in the top 10%, nor are they in the bottom 5%. That's a very large swath of schools that fall into that commendable range. And if you are a high school, it means that you must also have a graduation rate that is higher than 67%. We have 10 K-8 schools that have a targeted designation. That means on the whole, the school score is performing in the commendable zone. However, they have a subgroup that is performing in that bottom 5% relative to their subgroup peers across the state. Comprehensive designation, we have 4 schools there. That is a school whose overall performance is in the bottom 5% of the state. And then the newest designation that was introduced last year is the intensive designation. And that is 6 schools in our district, and you attain an intensive designation if you have been identified as a comprehensive school. And in your 4-year school improvement cycle, at the end of those 4 years, if you remain comprehensive, you then get this intensive designation, which means greater support and greater accountability with the state. Here's the breakdown of those schools that fall into each of those designations. These are our charter schools and their performance over the years. And then we'd like to highlight a couple case studies. So the first one we'd really like to highlight is Haskell. If you look at both their proficiency, meeting grade level targets, and also how much they've grown their students, you can see that they've done exceptionally well, particularly in the area of math. No surprise, they are our STEAM program. They went from being a comprehensive school 6 years ago, meaning that they were in the bottom 5% of all schools in the state, to where they are now an exemplary school. As of last school year, they are in the top 10% of all schools in the state. Huge kudos to the work that's going on with the staff at Haskell. Another school that we'd like to highlight, Rolling Green. Rolling Green was on a, targeted designation status due to children with disabilities and Black students performing in the bottom 5% relative to their subgroup peers. And they remained targeted after the 4-year cycle with children with disabilities. However, if you look at how they performed last year, they moved up to commendable status for all students. And you can see how they performed in their proficiency and in their growth. Kennedy is another school that we've highlighted. Kennedy started off a 4-year cycle in 2018 that was a comprehensive cycle. They remained comprehensive in their designation, in their performance at the end of that 4-year cycle, which flipped them into an intensive designation. And while they remain in that intensive designation, what we'd like to highlight here is, yes, Kennedy and a number of other similarly situated schools, they still remain in that intensive status. Kennedy actually doubled the amount of points that they received for their summative score. It's a score that you get 0 out of 100 points, and Kennedy had gone from 17 points in school year 23 to 38 points last year. Keeping in mind the cutoff between that comprehensive and commendable is a score of 40. So they were just really a 1.5 shy from Kennedy hitting that commendable status. So kudos to Kennedy, very much on the right trajectory. So when we're looking to, we have 10 elementary schools looking at growth that nearly achieved or fully achieved all the possible points that they could get for growing their students' academic performance at a faster rate than other school districts and other schools in the state. And so you can see for these different subgroups, you can see those schools where they received full points for how much their growth outpaced other schools across the state. We had 4 of our middle schools that made big strides with growing their students, with outpacing the average performance across the state: West, Lincoln, Kennedy, and Risa. And all 3 of our middle school special programs did the same. They accelerated student learning at a rate that was higher than the average in the state. So I'll pause there. After going through summative designations and performance for our K-8 schools, are there any questions from the board?
Does anyone have any questions? This is on the K-8 portion, and we'll move on to the high schools. So, President Pearson.
Yes. So I'm happy to see improvement. The question will always, will frequently be asked, with the absenteeism at 46, 48%, what made the difference in the improvement? What did they do different, and how were they able to accomplish this at a rate of 48%, 46% absenteeism? And the second part of this question is, what is working well for schools? Have we looked at what previously was their challenge, and if other schools face those same challenges, and have we shared the how with those other schools?
We do throughout I'll answer the latter question first. Through our meetings and professional learning that we have with our principals, when we have all principals come together on a monthly basis, or when we bring them together by level, like elementary all together or middle school all together, we certainly have time that's built in this school year for them to be able to collaborate and share exactly that. What was our best practices that really helped us to move the needle? I would say you bring up your first question is really poignant. How are we doing that if we don't have butts in seats 46% of the time? I think what that demonstrates is that we had to be very effective with the time that we do have the students in their seats in the classroom. So if you look at elementary as an example and what they've done with new curriculum implementation across literacy and math, we have very strong fidelity to that curriculum, and that's paying dividends. I would also add, last year, the majority of our elementary schools did have extended time through the ARP ESSER funding, and that is something that went away for this school year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And we'll be, in the future sessions, including the retreat, we'll be going into a lot more detail about, what's working and what opportunities we have for improvements at some of the schools. So if there aren't any questions, we'll move on to the next session.
Sure. So moving on to high schools. Overall, we saw a 5% increase in our graduation rate. And importantly, We had 56% of our seniors last year that participated in advanced placement dual credit classes or were candidates for the Rockford Promise Scholarship by achieving a 3.0 GPA. And then also, Auburn moved from being intensive, the very lowest designation, up to commendable in just 1 year. When we're looking at proficiency at high school, the measurement that is used is the SAT that is taken in 11th grade. And I think it's really important to distinguish here how ISB calculates proficiency relative to how SAT themselves calculate proficiency. The cutoff that is identified by the State Board of Education in ELA, with their cutoff, it's a score of 540. That would mean that 15% of our students are proficient, according to the State Board, on the SAT. SAT actually states that it's a score of 480 to achieve proficiency. And according to them, we would have 35% proficiency. So the numbers are relative here in terms of where they're creating the cutoffs for how we identify what is proficiency with ELA. And that is the same in math, though to a smaller degree. Here's a pie chart demonstrating how schools receive their summative designation. Proficiency is 25%. Graduation rate is fully 50%. And then again, you have chronic absenteeism, the 5 essential survey, and it also includes freshman on track rate. Looking at proficiency on the SAT, that's English language arts. Here's math proficiency. Again, certainly work to do here. Science proficiency has remained flat. And then if we want to benchmark our proficiency relative to the state and other similarly situated school districts, you can see that we went down in both ELA and math, and generally that was the trend across the state where we saw a downward trend in this performance. Looking at our freshmen on track, we made giant strides in school year 22, and then we maintained that across school year 23 and 24. This is how our freshmen on track benchmarks across the state. You can see a pretty good mix of up and down here. Looking at our graduation rate as that's broken up by subgroups, demographics. And then we also have that broken up by each of the high schools. And this is how our graduation rate benchmarks. And then I had mentioned, when you see our freshmen on track go up, when you see our grad rate goes up, did we just lower expectations? Did we just inflate grades? I think this is a really important slide to be dialed in on. I had mentioned this early. 56% of our seniors took advanced placement or dual credit or qualified for the Rockford Promise Scholarship. So there's certainly a good deal of rigor that is going into getting a diploma in Rockford Public Schools. By school designation, you can see that we have 2 commendable and 2 targeted schools. East, their targeted group is children with disabilities, and Jefferson has a new targeted group that is students with 2 or more races. Highlighting one of our high schools, Auburn, we had mentioned that they had been comprehensive for the past several years. Even though their overall score was at a commendable level, Auburn was not getting past the threshold of 67% graduation rate. So this last year was the first time they got past that. In the words of our principals, they said that's when the Christmas tree lights go on. If you don't get 67% grad rate, you just get 0 points across the board. Once you cross that threshold of 67%, you get your points for your graduation rate, and you get your points now for the 5 essentials and for proficiency and for freshmen on track. Questions as it relates to the high school designations?
Does anyone have any questions on the high school designations? President Pearson.
So first of all, I commend the scholars that are exceeding and being successful and, you know, being able to participate in the dual credit program and all of those wonderful things. It is the percentage that are not doing so well that, and we have to pay attention to that, because it leaves a question with what I know to be with the increase in graduation rate. It leaves a couple of questions. One, the percentage that have struggled and not been successful, you know, the struggle with integrated math, the struggle with attendance rate, and yet there's an increase in graduation rate. So it leaves questions about how successful are we in that area with those other struggles. And then when you get feedback of students not being successful, specifically with integrated math, and they attend summer school, and they go for a day or two and is declared proficient, are they really? And however, the graduation rate increases. So how do we connect all the dots with that? Are we looking at just getting them across the finish line? How does that support college and career readiness for that percentage?
I think I'll jump in on this one, Board President Pearson. I think the rigor index that we've shared, I think, is going to be a really important factor. And what I think we want to make sure that we see is, as graduation rate, freshman on track rate, and other metrics that are related to passing classes improves, we should also see growth in the students that have rigorous experiences. So I think we have to pair these two metrics together. And so if we see massive increases in graduation rate, but we're not seeing the number of students increasing that are getting a 3.0 GPA, which means they're way more than just getting by, which is the Rockford Promise standard, or that they are getting AP or dual credit. So I think that is one important way that we are going to continue to share this data with the district and with our community, because it's really important to make sure that we have other metrics that are partnered. The other thing we're going to be able to continue to look at is our SAT scores, which will soon be our ACT scores, because we've switched back. So we do have a standardized test that we can pair as well. And we all know that standardized tests are very imperfect ways to measure that for multiple reasons. One, because as Dr. Gallagher mentioned, where the cut score is set can really skew the data. But number two, some students are very capable of being successful in college and in career without doing really well on a standardized test. But there should be multiple measures that we look at. And so I think what we need to continue to talk about is, as we aspire to have all of our students graduate and to eliminate predictability by racial outcome, which is something that's been a sad truth in our district for far too long, how do we also ensure that we're seeing similar gains with SAT, now ACT score, and similar gains with our students achieving some kind of other measurement other than ACT, like the 3.0 GPA standard of Rockford Promise, which means they've been accepted to NIU and or Rockford University, and or taking on a college level class while they're still in high school with dual credit or AP. And so I think that 56% number is a powerful start. And I think we need to continue to have that number track as closely as possible with our graduation rate as possible. We will also be adding in career readiness certificates moving forward, because some of our students really aspire for their post-secondary experience to be going right into a career. And so we are going to work to track that. We also think there's significant missed opportunity right now with, you saw a very small number of students that are achieving the seal of biliteracy. There's a huge opportunity with all the languages that are spoken natively in our district to very dramatically accelerate that. So we plan to that is another way that students can show that. So I think we hope we have multiple ways students can show readiness, that the diploma becomes the floor, but we show the other types of success factors to go with that. And I would ask that the board continue to hold us accountable for not only improving graduation rate, but that we see that each school, each classroom, we're fighting to make progress on those other metrics that I've laid out. Anything you'd like to add, Dr. Gallagher? Or?
No, I think that succinctly covers it. And we do still have a couple slides to show the aggregate for the district. Okay.
Okay, so just want to give praises to all of the staff and teachers and students and everybody who's trying to work hard to get to reach these levels and these goals. So my question is, like, what are we doing as a district to help the students that are in the schools that are not achieving the goals? You know, you said that the data can be skewed possibly because of where the cutoff is regarding what the state, the goal the state has. But that essentially is the goal. It doesn't matter, you know, where a cutoff is or anything. Like, what are we doing to make sure that we reach the goal with all of our students and not, you know, just looking at, oh yeah, well, if the cutoff was like this, then we will be passing it, but it's not. The cutoff is where the cutoff is. So we need to, I want to know what the steps are to make sure that we are trending as a whole, not thinking about, okay, we would have made it if the cutoff was something. No, that's not, you know, that's irrelevant. But just, I want to know, what are we doing to ensure that the students are getting the proficiency in the integrated math or in the English and language arts? Like, those are the questions I have. Like, okay, so you said it was like an autopsy, but so what did you find from the autopsy? When you get to autopsy, there's also a report that tells you what path and things you need to go. I'm interested in knowing what's the path that we need to go.
That's a great question, and I think we're going to dive pretty deeply into that. At the next meeting, we're going to be talking about all of our local steps that we're taking to do that. So the Performance Monitoring Committee is going to talk about what we call our standards of practice. And those are the guaranteed experiences that we hold schools accountable for delivering on, as well as our standards of service, which are the ways the district office can help. Number two, at the retreat, I believe the plan at this point is going to be, we're actually going to pull in some of our schools. 3 of them, I think, is the plan right now, to have some success panels where we can hear directly and ask principals themselves, hey, what are you doing to address some of these gaps? And I think we've got I think we'll have an excellent balance of schools to share with you at the retreat. I know they're working hard to identify where those schools are going to be identified. So I think what you're talking about is the really important local work that we have to do, and that's where our system-wide framework and our standards of practice come into play. So that's something we'll talk about a bunch next meeting, and we will make sure that you have a very strong opportunity to discuss all of the different things that we are trying to do locally to do that. But I think an example would be, at each level, there are things that we measure schools that they get points on that determine whether or not students are making progress and getting those guaranteed experiences that will drive things like SAT score improvements, graduation rate improvements, IAR improvements.
So my follow-up question to that is, will we be given a breakdown as far as, you know, this measure shows every year, you know, what the trending is. So I want to see a correlation of the participation with integrative math, like what is being taught to the students to ensure that they're able to, and I'm not saying, you know, teaching to the test type of things, but what skills are being taught, that are the students given the opportunity to develop so they can, you know, advance as a whole in these measures. So, you know that every year this is what the thing is going to be. So if we've been trying integrative math, this is just hypothetical, for 10 plus years, you know, and it's not, we're not receiving the gains that we need. What type of planning is being done, like concurrently, regarding different programs and different instructional materials to assist and to ensure that we're making the appropriate gains? Anybody?
We'll just make sure that if any board members have requests, please send them to me, and I'll make sure we get them to our committee chairs and our staff liaisons, and we'll make sure any local data that you want to see can be part of our conversation. I think we've got a pretty good start on, I think, what you're looking for, which is what are we locally doing to make sure the state trends are better. And if there are specific data sets, if we're able to slice and dice them and get them to you, we still have 2 weeks in between the meeting to get them there. So we'll certainly leave that to our staff liaisons to support our board committee chairs.
So I just want to make sure that that was my request. That last question I just asked, like I want to know, see the different programs that are being taught in correlation with how the scores rise and fall, and what's an alternative to what we're using to try to see how it's trending with other schools and things like that. Mm-hmm. Everybody understand what I'm getting?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just to be clear, I think what we can provide that would work with that is we can potentially share the performance of students based on the sequence of courses that they've taken and maybe their grades in those courses and things like that. I think we could, that's probably something we could do. For example, if you want to know what the math or science sequence that they completed or something like that, or.
I want to know is what we're teaching, right, and what these students are being evaluated on. Is it good enough, or not even good enough? Is it properly aligned with what the state is requiring us to do? And if it's, you know, if that program that we're doing is not working, and if there are other programs that are properly aligned, I feel like we've given the programs that we're working with significant amount of time to see if it's good enough, like what the trend are. Is it continually trending up, or is it always dipping up and down, up and down, up and down? You know, I want to make sure that we're looking at all of the efforts that we're doing and seeing like, okay, we're doing all the efforts, we're doing this, we're teaching this, they're just not getting it. So maybe it's one of our instructions or programs or something that we're teaching that's not clicking with our students. So that's the gist of it. Thank you.
Okay, jumping ahead, a couple slides here. Again, these are the districts. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just real quick on on those issues, I guess. Just to be clear, for high schools, the proficiency for math, or is it for all, well, math and English is from the SAT, correct? And then where's science from?
The pie chart, if you keep going back.
Yes.
That is from the Illinois Science Assessment. It is a separate assessment.
Okay. And then can you explain what English learner is?
English learner, actually I can't. That's like probably 70 pages of the 170 pages for the business rules, so I couldn't get into the nuance of it, but effectively it's on their access test for their progress towards proficiency in English. It's a calculation related to that.
Okay, thank you. And then just on the on the points that Ms. Pearson and Ms. McCall made on the SATs, I mean, the cutoff, if the cutoff was what the SAT said the cutoff is, I mean, it would raise our scores, but it would also raise everybody else's scores across the state. And even if the cutoff was what the SAT says it is, it still means we have 65% that are not proficient in math. And obviously that's something that we would want to talk about either way. So I just want to add that, I guess.
And the reason we shared that was not to make excuses, but just to say, there's a big debate going on in the state of Illinois, and I think as we switch to the ACT, this is likely to change. The state superintendent is very committed to changing this. It sends, I think, a really incorrect message about students across the state of Illinois. When you look at the state average, we'll have 65 to 70% of students in the state of Illinois in some classes that will go on and be very successful in their freshman year of college, but our state average is at about 35%. And the reason that disconnect exists, A, is because some students don't perform well on standardized tests. but B, and more significantly in the state of Illinois, we've set our cut score at about the 70th percentile. So we set it up in a way that doesn't reflect good comparison to the SAT across the country or to other states. So we're not trying to say it isn't still a huge opportunity for improvement. We just think it's important that the board sees the context of what the actual admission standards would be to get into a place like NIU or Rockford University or places where a lot of our students go. They would not need to have a 540 on the SAT to get in. They would be able to get in with the SAT recommended number. And we think it's important to show it both ways. This is still the state standard, but we also think it's important to acknowledge that the state standard is about a standard deviation higher than every state in the country. I think we have the third or fourth highest standards in the entire country in terms of where we set our high school proficiency and our ELA. So when we talk about proficiency, it can become a really kind of boring math conversation, but at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that we are telling the whole story in terms of how our students are performing. So that was why we did that.
Okay, I think those are all the questions on that if you want to proceed. Thank you.
Okay, actually, I'm going to need some tech assistance from the AV room. My clicker is no longer clicking. Oh, here we go. Thank you. Okay. This is just showing some basic information for those districts that we're benchmarking against. So showing their enrollment and the percentage of low income, their mobility rate, their chronic absenteeism percentage. Getting back to what we call this candlestick chart, this is showing their increase in their raw summative score. Again, it's on a scale of 0 to 100 points. This is showing how, if it's filled in blue, how they've improved their summative designation score from 23 to 24, or if it's empty, how that score has declined. And you can see again, great majority of our schools showed growth in terms of their summative score, and we have a number of schools that are highlighted on the side there and on the graph that increased 20 or more points. So you can see Kennedy and Lincoln have an asterisk next to them. Those two schools actually doubled their scores. This is showing the same thing, just in a different manner. And instead of it just being 23, 24, we're looking over school year 22, 23, and 24. School year 24 being those darker dots, you can see that across the majority of our schools, their performance in this last year is the highest summative score that they have received out of these 3 last years. Any questions related to that? I'm imagining we exhausted many of them after the high schools, but.
Does anyone have any questions? Doesn't look like it. Thank you, Dr. Gallagher.
Thank you.
Dr. Jarrett, did you have any concluding remarks?
I do not, thank you, but we will look forward to continuing to follow up on the questions that were raised tonight at the next meeting, as well as the next two, both the retreat as well as the conversation on the 19th. Let's talk about local performance in greater detail. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and then next was a request to provide an overview of how the district will be listening to feedback about grading practices in our secondary schools. Dr. Gallagher and Ms. Stettman will outline the process that the administration is using or will be using to learn more from our teachers and students.
Yes, good evening. So as we mentioned, throughout the report, it's really important to us that our student performance and their grades sort of align. And so we are going to be engaging in some pretty deep listening over the next 2 months to teachers and to students, and using our collaborative committee of instructional council. So recently there's been some concerns about some grading practices that have been in place this school year, and we feel like we need to learn more. We need to hear from a broader audience of teachers, and we also need to listen to our students and what they're experiencing, which we started at the Superintendent Student Advisory Council in October, or in September rather. So here's kind of an outline of how we plan to do that. This Wednesday, the Instructional Council Steering Committee will meet, and we're going to discuss sort of how that conversation is going to take shape at the monthly meeting on November 13th of Instructional Council. We plan to invite a school team in so that we can really do some deep listening to their experience and really better understand the things that they're struggling with, and also what's going really well from their perspective as teachers. On that same day, November 13th, Dr. Reed and our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion team is hosting a listening session for middle and high school students. And so we've worked together across departments to bake in some questions about how our students are experiencing this shift in grading practices, and also listening to their experience about being students in math class. We want to hear about their experience in integrated math or math discourse in middle school. We also want to hear about whether or not they feel like their grades are reflecting their performance and their learning in class, and what that means for them. In November and December, Dr. Gallagher?
Yeah, in November and December, we're going to be having school-based conversations. Those will start with our curriculum and instructional lead teachers, and that'll also include principals and ARs, just so that we can better understand the problem as it relates to their experience, their perception with their role as those stakeholders.
And what we'd like to do is then kind of round up our data, qualitative primarily, listening to our students, listening to our teachers, and identifying what areas we might have for any change. A good time for change is at the end of a marking period, so that we don't sort of change the game in the middle of a semester. And so if we identify that changes are needed, the end of semester 1 is January 29th. And what we'd like to do is not only bring that data back to Instructional Council, but then provide a report back to you all as the board as well. What did we hear from our students? What did we hear from our teachers? And what are we taking action on as a result? So, at its very heart, a student's grade is a form of communication from the teacher to the student to the teacher, and also the teacher to the families. And we want to make sure that whatever mark or method we use is accurately communicating what we intend, and that it's equitably and consistently used across the district. That's a tall order. It's something that districts across the nation are struggling with. And what we're committed to is just continuing to listen to our system, especially those closest to it, teachers and students, and trying to get it closer to right as we continue to listen.
Thank you. So do you expect that you'll report to us before the end of the next semester, or before the end of this semester?
Yes. Yeah, we'll be back here either, and we'll talk about how you'd like that formatted, but by January.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions?
So, of course, we're always appreciative of the listening sessions, but have we considered, prior to making a decision and putting things in place, to have those listening sessions on the front end, as opposed to when there is a negative response or a concerning response to our current practice, to then come up with a solution to hear from how can we get, because we've done that for years. So when are we going to put things on the front end, as opposed to reacting to outcomes that's not favorable?
Well, in this particular instance, I do want to make sure that I note that we visited every school before we even started any of our work, and we met with the school leadership team at every school, not only to introduce the concept of shifts in grading, but also to hear what that might look like in each individual school. So before we started anything, we did start with a school-based approach. However, what changed this year was some consistent implementation of some commitments across the board. And I think that's where we're starting to hear a little bit more. So as any good process would do, we're going to stop as we're hearing some feedback, pause, listen, recalibrate and make sure we're all still moving forward together. This has been quite a lengthy process. It's been a couple of years and started with a collaborative design team of administrators and teachers, followed by the development of a tool, followed by individual school listening sessions, followed by then some consistent commitments. So we've been on this trajectory for quite some time, and I think it's good for us right now to pause and just do some deep listening to understand the implications of those commitments.
So when you use the word shift, what exactly are you describing? What's shifting? What's different?
So what I'd love to do is dive into that a little bit more, maybe in a written report or time when we have a little bit more time. But essentially, we've made 3 big shifts in our instructional grading practices that are really all focused on making sure that our grades focus not on behavior, but on learning. To make sure that we are providing high quality student feedback and to make sure that our students always have really an opportunity to demonstrate their learning. So it's 3 overall shifts and a rather complex tool. And what we're focused on right now is one narrow piece of that overall framework. And I'd love, as we go through this, to be able to share more about that in more depth.
I would just want to reiterate, this shift in the grading practice is something that's been going on for the last 6 years. It's something I experienced with Heidi and the curriculum team coming out to Roosevelt when I was the principal. And as we've been moving towards more equitable grading practices, again, this is something that originated out of meetings with all of our secondary assistant principals and principals over the course of last spring, where everybody was in different spaces or progression towards equitable grading practices, and the principals felt strongly that we need to be at a point where we can normalize some of the expectations as it relates to grades, because if you're looking at a student's report card at East High School or at RESA, how their grades are calculated from teacher to teacher to teacher can vary very widely, and that's even more so true school to school. So this was just us taking the opportunity. We know the shift, the direction that we're headed. How can we help to normalize that so that we have equitable expectations, so what we're communicating is the same across teachers, across schools in these very finite areas?
What exactly do you mean when you say equitable grading practice? Give me an example of what equitable grading practice look like.
I would say, for example, teacher A is an English teacher and gives everybody 10 points of extra credit for bringing in Kleenex boxes, and teacher B doesn't. I would say teacher A has a different makeup policy for tests than teacher B. Teacher A has a different approach to assessing the end of a unit exam. Teacher A and B have a different approach on homework. So what we're attempting to do is have more consistency school-wide, and so we've honed in very much on the conversation about 2 really key things we think. Mrs. Dedman mentioned a bunch of them, but I think there's 2 broad things we want to do a better job of as a district, and this is where we're pausing to kind of make sure we're getting the balance right. A, and most importantly, we want grades to be a true reflection of student learning. That's what I mean by behavior versus, was meant by behavior versus actual student performance, so that these are high quality assessments that truly demonstrate learning the standards, and that can be inconsistent. We want to make sure we build capacity for that to be consistent. And B, and I think this is where our teachers have that have raised concerns, have really important concerns, and that is grades are also a way we teach a skill that we call executive functioning. It's a psychological term of kind of, is your brain developing the ability to learn about skills like meeting deadlines? And we often hear that preparing for life and things like that. And so as we've heard some complaints about this, I think there have been some concerns raised that perhaps we haven't done enough to maintain executive functioning consistency. And that's where conversations about percentages and things like that have come in. So we really want to make sure that our grades do both of those things. We want to make sure they really do demonstrate learning the standards, so that an A in a class means we're going to likely be successful on a high stakes exam whenever possible, or that it's going to show improvement, many things the board talked about. But we also want to make sure that as students have multiple opportunities, hopefully, to demonstrate learning, that it isn't at the expense of learning how to manage time and learning those skills. And when we've talked to our students in our SSAC on a preliminary basis, they talk about those things as well. So I think we're likely to hear really consistent feedback from teachers, students, principals. And I just think it's really important that we do pause and listen here and make sure that we didn't underdo the importance of executive functioning and our desire to give students multiple opportunities to learn. And so that's really where we are as a system right now. We've spent a long time on this, and every district across the country pretty much has struggled with where to land this. There's been some back and forth, and I just think it's important that we land where Rockford needs to land. And that means listening to our students and listening to our teachers.
Thank you. Ms. McCall?
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. So my question is, you're going to have these listening sessions and, you're going to recalibrate and all this stuff. What will be what's the next step after the listening sessions? Like, what do you have a plan? Like, have you thought out about, if it goes this way, this could be our counter plan on how we're going to react to this one. Or if it goes this way, we're going to have a counter plan for this one. Like, I want to know, what's going to be the action steps after the listening session?
So what I have heard, not just from our Superintendent Student Advisory Council, who, by the way, led just an incredibly intelligent discussion on grading practices, and I was so thankful to hear what they had to say. What I'm hearing is that a particular practice that we're using right now with the Z code and the idea of a 0 is not communicating what we really need to communicate to students and their families. So I'd love to know, why not, and what other ideas do you have, making sure that we stay true to our shifts, which that grades are not based on behavior, they're based on learning, that students receive high quality feedback, and that their grades represent mastery of the content. Those are the three things that are non-negotiable. The practices are things that we can fine tune. And so that's what I'm hearing, is that because the grade is a communication tool, that Z code maybe isn't exactly the right answer. And so I think it's wise for us to pause and say, okay, well, if that's not the right answer, what other ideas do you have, and what is it indirectly communicating to students, which might be, I don't have to do any of the work of the 10% if all I have to do is focus on the 90%. Well, that's not really what's intended here. So I think by listening to our students and to our teachers, I think we're going to get at not only clarifying what the problem is, which isn't necessarily our effort at more consistent and equitable grading practices across the district, but maybe just how this move is communicating with teachers and students and families, and what other ideas are out there. So for next steps, maybe it's a different code. Maybe it is some more boundaries around when that is used and when it's not used. We're hearing some really great questions that we don't necessarily have firm answers for yet, and we should and we will. But we want to make sure that we're really clear on the problem.
Okay, and just to follow up on that, so I'm interested in, well, I think it's important to know timeline of the next steps too. So when you're doing all of the investigation and all the listening and things like that, I need to see, I think it would be very helpful if there was a timeline as to implementation or continued implementation, of the whatever it is that comes from the problem and comes from the listening session. So I want to make sure that we keep in mind that there needs to be, when the problem is identified, maybe clearly state that this is the problem that was derived from our listening sessions. This is how we're going to respond to it, and this is the timeline that we're going to respond. That's how I would like to see progress coming from these listening sessions. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that makes a lot of sense. President Pearson?
So this Z code, was there listening sessions regarding that, and there was buy-in regarding the Z code, and now all of a sudden the Z code is a problem?
So remember, we've heard from some faculty that raised that concern, but there are also faculty members that have been using that practice and think very strongly, and think that's a really important practice to use. And so that's where we have to expand the listening, and that's where we're going to trust our partners at the REA and pull in some principal leadership as well and really have a conversation to get a sense of where teachers are. So I think you could talk to teachers across the district and you would get varying answers to that. And we want to make sure that we really get a sense of where the collective wants to go so that we can have some consistency. I think that it is clear that there is enough concern about that when we moved from it being optional to it being more of a standardized approach that we needed to pause and do that. But there are many, many content area teams across our district, multiple schools where there is less conversation about this as a concern. Then there are some schools where it's a really hot topic right now, and everywhere in between. And so that's where we have to pause and listen and make sure that we truly listen to the faculty voice as well as the student voice and land this. But to be clear, there are people out there that really think that that have worked out systems that work really well to increase student achievement while ensuring that they are using this as a particular tactic in a way that is still helping students with their executive functioning skills. I think there are some folks out there that are really frustrated that feel like that hurts their ability to improve executive functioning skills, and that's where a lot of the debate is. I think Ms. Detman said it well, that is it communicating what it's supposed to be communicating? I think there's some folks out there that have very much figured that out and that works for them. And then there are some others that feel really frustrated. They're saying, hey, this isn't really communicating what I want it to communicate. And so that's where we'll pause and go from there. But there is not unanimity on this in our district. And I don't know that we will ever get to a unanimous consent on an issue. This is a very emotional and professionally important topic to teachers. This is at the heart of their professionalism, so we have to honor those different perspectives and hopefully have broad enough parameters where we don't feel like we have winners and losers that come out of whatever we decide. We clearly went a little too far in terms of, for some individuals, at least in our district, they're feeling like their voice was not properly heard. So we're going to try to listen to folks and come back and hopefully land in a better place for the second semester. In the meantime, I have encouraged teachers that if they do have concerns to reach out to their principals. And I think there are common sense steps that they can take in the meantime in partnership with their principal if they truly feel like this grading practice is causing significant problems for them. But I think in terms of making major shifts, if we are going to do any, to Ms. McCall's point, the end of the semester is when you can expect that we will make those changes.
You know, I think that I know that you're going to be listening to teachers and students, but I think we really need to make sure that this is explained in a way that parents and grandparents can understand, because as it is now, one parent called and said, so my kid can get 50% off the bat. So if he get 30% on a test, does that give him an 80% grade? So that was their interpretation, right? So I think that that is important that we thoroughly explain what's really going on with the Z code. And that was the whole point of the desired topic on tonight, a basic definition of it, the concern, and how we can circle back around to this point with more information. That's it, that's all. Nothing complicated, okay? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gallagher. Thank you, Ms. Detman. Our last item on the Performance Monitoring Committee is to preview the consent agenda items. Are there any questions on those? All right, thank you. That concludes the business of the Performance Monitoring Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Ms. McCall will now lead the Planning and Development Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. Item 6A is the Questica budget and project software. So the district needs new projection software and would like to obtain a comprehensive solution that incorporates the annual budget process within a multi-year projection software. The district previously used Frontline Forecast 5 software to model multi-year projections, and a combination of other tools, including Google, Excel, Business Plus, and Basecamp for annual budget computation. Frontline has not updated Forecast 5 software since acquired it from PMA many years ago, and the software application has become obsolete. Questica has developed a software package that is not only does budget preparation in real time, but also stores previous year's actuals and updates and multi-year financial projections in real time as well. Our current processes are largely manual and time-consuming, which can lead to errors. Are there any questions for Dr. Brown? Okay, seeing none, the Questica software purchase will be brought to the board for approval at the November 19th board meeting. Item B is facility master plan funding options. I will now turn the meeting over to Dr. Brown to give an an update on the facilities master plan funding options. Not give up, don't give up.
No, I won't. I'm not giving up. This is month 3. So, you have the write-up that we've just been carrying forward every month, and so we have talked about, 4 different options: traditional referendum, the 1% sales tax, doing a borrowing under the debt service extension base, or health, life, safety borrowing, and then also the last one would be a combination of all of the above. So last month we talked about not really moving ahead with option 1, the traditional referendum. We really don't think there's time to do, a good community education on that one. Same thing with option 2 with respect to the 1% sales tax. What we did spend time talking about last month was option 3, which is to do a borrowing under the health, life, safety bond issuance. And that's something that we would like to get guidance from you on tonight. You'll see there in the November update that we believe this is the best option at the current time. We believe we could borrow just under $10 million, which would make it what's called a bank qualified loan, not really a loan, a bond sale, which means we could go directly to a bank and place these bonds without all the expense of actually getting a rating agency review and whatnot. And this would allow us to kick off and free up some of the funds in the health, life, safety for some of the future projects that we're going to have going on. So if that's something we would like to consider doing, I've got a rough schedule, and I don't know if he's going to pull that up or not. You'll see a schedule of events that was actually included in your board packet there. If this is something we want to move forward on, there it is right there. I would just need guidance from you guys to actually bring back documentation. It still has to be approved by you guys formally if this is something that we decide that we want to do. If you're good with moving forward with a bond sale of approximately $10 million, it would actually go to the committee of the whole meeting where we would hold what they call the bond issue notification public hearing. It just means that we're going to give the community notice that we plan on selling bonds. And then you'd actually approve it at the December board meeting. And again, this gets us a start on, the facility master plan work that we are planning on doing. Obviously, we'd come then probably in the springtime with a much more comprehensive plan on how we would really fund the remainder of it. We do have some cash on hand that we can put toward the plan right now, and we are starting to spend some of that right now on architectural drawings. We've also, we'll start spending money very shortly here. You'll see bids come back for the CCEC here this next month, and we will really begin to start, laying out quite a bit of cash on that one too. So this is something we'd like to move forward with. Again, like we talked about last month, we could do it in a manner that would not raise the bond and the interest levy above what it currently is right now. So, this would really just fix it for the next 2 or 3 years at the exact same level it is right now. So that's what we'd like to do. And if you guys are good with that, we'll go ahead and get started on the paperwork. Again, you'd still have to formally approve it, in December. And if you changed your mind and decided not to do it, that's okay too. But I need to at least get moving so we can at least get the documentation in place so you can actually vote on it. So just kind of thumbs up, yes or no, if you think this is something you'd like us to move forward with formally. That's all I really need right now.
I have a question before the thumbs go up.
Madam President.
Thank you, Vice President McCall. So remind me of how did we, on the previous facilities master plan, did you sell bonds then? Was this a topic then? And I don't think you were here, but.
I wasn't, but I'm familiar with it. So
Okay,
there were
so-
bonds sold last time around. That's correct.
Okay, I remember a discussion about bonds years ago, or the conversation being made reference to the sale of bonds.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
If you want, I can give you a little more details because I was here for it. We sold $139 million of GO bonds. We sold some bonds that kind of committed our CPPRT funding, which then we've eventually moved out of that, and then multiple health, life, safety bond issuances. So I think there's a combination of 3 different bond issuances that we did with our previous facilities plan. But it's been a little while, I think, since we've done anything other than health, life, safety bonds.
Yeah, and I do think there might be an opportunity, and we're just kind of seeing how things are working out. We think there might be an opportunity to actually retire the 2016 issue of the qualified school construction bonds a year early. So that might be something that, you know, we're gonna do as well, and we'll let you guys know if we're planning on doing that. But the timing might work well for us to just be able to go ahead and take those bonds and get those paid off a year earlier than we were planning on doing. So, you know, we're looking at kind of all the different avenues on how to manage the debt side, you know, for the district right now too. So.
Mrs. Bennett.
What would be a reason to not do this?
A reason not to do it would be, you know, we're going to have to borrow the money at some point. We think there's a chance to borrow attractively right now, given that we can do, you know, what I was calling a bank qualified issue and be able to go directly to a bank and sell these bonds. You know, that would be a reason to do it. A reason, you know, not to do it is, you know, we still do have some cash. It's just, we're going to probably be coming back sometime in the next 3 or 4 months to borrow some money at some point, even if it's the next 6 months. We're probably going to come back and ask for a higher dollar amount. We think by borrowing this money now, you know, we can maybe, you know, delay having to come back, you know, maybe till next fall or so. So, you know, we are going to have to borrow at some point, I guess, is the answer. You know, we just think there's an attractive window right now to do a direct placement of these bonds at probably a lower interest rate than we get if we had to go borrow in the capital markets.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Carpenter.
I might have asked this before, I don't remember, but who decides whether the money is being used appropriately for health, life, safety? Like you said, you think we have projects that can fall under that, but.
Right, great question. So what we have to do when we're going to spend money for health, life, safety is we actually have to write health, life, safety amendments in the Illinois State Board of Education, what they call the IWAS portal. And so those projects that are in there right now that have already been, you know, penciled out through the decennial life safety 10-year surveys that we have to do are already sitting out there approved right now. That process is we have an architect go through and identify deficiencies in our building. And then once we've identified the deficiencies in the building with a cost, it actually goes to the Regional Office of Education. The regional superintendent actually has to sign off on it and say, yes, we do know that these are actually deficiencies. And then those actually have to go down to the State Board of Education for actual approval to be a qualified health, life, safety, you know, eligible project. And then when we would sell these bonds, they would actually be deposited in the Health Life Safety Fund, meaning that they couldn't be used for anything else and they could only be used for these approved projects. And so we've probably got, what, Mike, probably $40 or $50 million worth of Health Life Safety projects that are sitting out there approved right now that we're just, you know, kind of waiting for the money to come in on right now. So, it's a very good process to make sure that you don't spend the money on things other than that. But the key is to make sure that when those bonds are sold, they go in the Health Life Safety Fund, meaning they can't be used for anything else.
All right, thank you. And I guess just real quick on Ms. Bennett's question, sorry. Is there any value in waiting as far as interest rates go?
It could be. I mean, we could wait to sell the bonds until, probably like February. I do think we'll probably get an interest rate cut this week. I think we'll probably get another interest rate cut maybe in December. The funny thing is when we got a 50 basis point cut 2 months ago in September, right now Treasuries are actually higher right now than they were after the 50 basis point cut, which is weird. I don't understand that part of it. But we're not actually tagged to the Treasury market. We're actually tagged to something called the municipal money, MMD. I can't remember what exactly the words, but that's actually what we borrow on. And right now that rate has actually been stable even after the rate cut. It didn't really move. And so, we could delay, the borrowing for a period of time. Just because we approve this doesn't mean we have to go ahead and sell the bonds right away. We've got some period of time we could wait to see, if we felt like it was a better time in the market. The way we would go about doing this is we'd go out and solicit quotes from a number of different banks, and they'd be larger banks, like JP Morgan, Wintrust, Associated, and we'd see who actually offered us the best deal. And if we didn't like it, we could just sit tight and wait. As long as we had board approval to do it, we could actually do the timing of the borrowing somewhere down the road if we thought interest rates were going to be more attractive.
All right, thank you.
Madam President.
So how does this tie in, if it tie in at all, to this QSCB, the Qualified School Construction Bond? Was that?
It doesn't tie with that one at all.
These are completely separate, correct?
That's
okay.
correct. Yep.
Thank you. Oh, one other thing. So you just want a consensus to move forward with the process?
That's correct. And then you guys still would actually have to approve it in December. So right now, I don't want to, spend time working on documentation and things like that if you're not even interested in approving it. So, this is really just to gauge whether you guys are comfortable moving forward with a sale of health life safety bonds. If you are, that's good. I'll work on the paperwork. And then December, you can say yes or no to it, thumbs up or thumbs down.
So you're going to present again on what you...
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so can we give a thumbs up for consensus and thumbs down for no? So wait, keep it up. I didn't.
All right. Good. Thank you.
I think that's okay. Thank you. Dr. Brown will bring forward the option chosen to the board for approval at the December 17th board meeting. We have item C, resolution to approve the tentative 2024 tax levy. Dr. Brown, the Chief Financial Officer, discussed three scenarios at our October Committee of the Whole meeting for the 2024 tax levy. Dr. Brown is here tonight to review the scenarios again, provide some additional information for us to consider, and answer any questions you may have regarding the three scenarios. A consensus of the board is needed as to which option the board would like to move forward for approval of the 2024 tentative levy at the November 19th board meeting. The administration is recommending that the board select option 3, taking new property and CPI. Is there a consensus to accept the administration's recommendation? Indicate so by thumbs up.
I can walk you back through them too if you want me to real quick.
I think that would be a good idea.
Okay. So, go ahead and walk through the options.
Sounds good. So option A, as you'll recall, is to not move forward with capturing the increase in the CPI of 3.4% or taking the increase on new property that has come on the tax rolls. So that would be A or number 1. The tax rate under that scenario would be 4.6365. Option B would be under just taking the increase on new property that's come on the tax rolls for this current year. That would result in about $635,000 of additional revenue. The tax rate under that scenario is 4.63. It's the same rate as the tax rate under A. The tax rate for new property is actually the tax rate for all existing property that then just gets applied to the new property that's coming on the tax rolls. And then option C, or number 3, would be taking the maximum allowable CPI increase, which is 3.4% over last year, along with the new property, and that would result in about $5.5 million of additional revenue. And the tax rate under that scenario would come in at 4.79 for that scenario. So those are the 3 options that we're looking at. We did run some scenarios that are attached in the board packet. I had sent these out in advance so you would get an opportunity to look at them for a number really of different properties and how this increase might affect them. We actually looked at it from the perspective of, you know, if a property got the average increase, you know, for the area, which we're thinking is going to be around 13.5%, if a property got about a 50% increase, and then if a property's assessed value stayed flat, meaning that you were assessed last year at the same level you were assessed at in the previous year. And the way the numbers come in is, you know, for the most part, unless your property actually receives the full amount of the average increase, your property tax increase under the scenario of taking CPI and new property is essentially flat. And if your EAV increase, valuation of your property stays the same, you'll actually see a decrease in your property taxes. So really under the scenario of getting the full, you know, increase of the average, that's when you would see a small impact. It primarily falls on commercial property and industrial property. You do see a tax increase on residential property as well, but you know, under these scenarios, it looks like the vast majority of it would fall on large property owners.
Ms. Stanford?
So I have pause with this because we have, as a board for a long time, not taken CPI. And I guess my question for you is, why do you think we need to take CPI? And I mean, are we not going to be able to balance the budget without it, or what's the reason that you think we need to take it?
Yeah, I think this year we've gotten to the point where we're going to have a very difficult time balancing the budget if we don't. We've seen a significant increase in our costs, especially with, you know, recently negotiated labor contracts. You know, we continue to see, you know, higher costs for, you know, things like fuel and those types of things. You know, that dip in the evidence-based funding that we had several years ago when we went from, you know, 10 to 12 million all the way down to 2 million, that was a permanent decrease in our annual funding that we will never, ever get back. You know, we did go back into Tier 1 this year, but as you recall last year, we had to work really, really hard to close a $10 million gap, and as you'll recall, you know, if we didn't do anything, we were looking at about $22 million for this year that we're talking about now. We're sitting at about 10 million if we don't take this. If we do take this, we're sitting at probably about, you know, 5 million that we're still going to have to figure out how to chip away at. You know, this would give us the opportunity, you know, to you know, still get some kind of an increase, you know, rather than, you know, the years when it was clear up at 5%. But I just don't think we're at a point now where we're going to be able to continue to rely on evidence-based funding just to kind of save the day on our annual budget. You know, the state is at a point now where they are probably going to be able to do evidence-based funding for next year in the amounts that we're accustomed to, which means we'll probably get between 9 and 10 million, and kind of all bets are off after that. The federal funding that the state's been relying on to plug their budget gaps is going to be gone They're going to be out of ESSER funds as well. And the only way for the state to really keep up with it is to continue to raise taxes, which I think is not going to be a popular option down in Springfield at some point either. So I think now is probably as good a time as any. No one likes to raise taxes, but I think we're at a point now where we're going to have a tough time balancing our budget going forward. And, if we don't take it, we'll do the best we can. But I can't promise you that I'm going to be able to bring back a balanced budget, in August and September when you'll have to approve it.
Do you see this as ongoing? Like, are we going to have to do this every year?
I think so. I think we're at that point. So.
Well, yeah. I mean, if the evidence-based funding's not there, we have to get it somewhere. We have to pay our bills, so.
Yep.
Madam President.
So we know for a fact that the evidence-based funding is not going to be there.
No, I don't know that. I'm saying next year it probably will be there. That's what we're being told. For FY26 budget, we're being told that it's likely to be there, but we're not being told after that there's a likelihood that it's going to be able to continue at the same levels. That's what we're being told right now.
And this decision will have to be made now.
Yeah, that's why we brought them last month, so you'd have time to consider it. So this month, because we have to have a preliminary hearing in November to be able to do the final approval in December. So that's why we brought them last month, so you guys would have a whole month to think about what you wanted to do here. So at this meeting, we'd have guidance on what paperwork we needed to bring for the first reading of the levy at the November meeting.
One thing I would just share too, and I know this is something everyone's reluctant. This is the first time I've ever recommended this, and I've been here in this capacity for 11 years, and we've every year not taken a levy. What's different for me, in addition to what Dr. Brown said, which is the main reason, which is just we've had massive inflationary costs for about 75% of our budget is labor.
Yeah.
So as everything costs 25% more than it did. And so evidence-based funding has helped, but we've run out of that, number one. Number two, we implemented a strategy under the board's leadership, and certainly one I supported as the superintendent, that we wanted to make sure we right-sized the tax rate so that property values could grow. And one of the things I do just want to remind the board, our tax rate peaked at $7.93 in 2015. Dr. Brown is projecting it will still continue to go down and will be at $4.79. Our previous low was $5.53 before the property values dropped in the 2008 crisis. So we're almost $1 lower than we were at our low. So the strategy of doing this for 11 years has made a real difference. We've seen property values go up $1.6 billion with this strategy. And so what's nice is we are now in what I would call a virtuous cycle, which is property values are going up faster at this point than rates. So as a result, rates can go down because we can capture CPI because property values are growing more than CPI. When property values grow less than CPI, then you run into the situation where the only way you can do it is the rate raising. So what's nice about doing it this year, in addition to that, is the board's long-term work here has really helped us grow home values. And now, after multiple years of pretty heavy inflationary costs, we can do this at a time where home values are continuing to go up at this point, and we won't see an actual rate increase. Now, some people may pay more in actual taxes. I mean, depending on how much their home value goes up, it'll be different for different homeowners. But I do just want to point out that over the last 10 years of this strategy, this board alone has dropped the tax rate by almost $3. In fact, more than $3. More than $3, excuse me. So basically the tax rate we're approaching a 50% rate cut from our peak. Pretty rapidly. We're going to be north of 40%. So you have done some great work. And so I do want to just applaud the board for that consistent work. I'm proud of that as well as the superintendent. But I do feel that it is time for us to at least contemplate this, because I would be concerned of the $5.5 million of budget adjustments we would have to make. I would be worried that some of our core instructional programming could be negatively impacted.
We'll start with Mr. Carpenter, followed by Ms. Haley and Ms. Stanford.
Thank you. The scenarios that you sent us, were those included in the packet for today?
Yep.
Oh, okay. I didn't see them, but okay, I'm looking at those. I was also going to mention or ask about the surrounding districts' tax rate. I think that at some point it was mentioned that we were the lowest, and I guess the tax rate is still staying the same. Is that what you just said?
Our rate, Dr. Brown projects, is going to go down another
about 60 cents. We're at 5.3 right now, roughly.
And at our current rate, we are the lowest in Winnebago and Boone County, whereas when we started this project, we were the second highest. So we've made real progress in terms of being regionally competitive.
All right, thank you. And then it looks, and I know you kind of explained it, but I wasn't looking at it when you were talking. But the scenario where a person would be paying more in taxes is if their property went up the highest amount of the assessed.
Yeah, if it went up the average that it's projected to go up overall for the county is well, our region, 13.4%. So if it went all the way up to the average, somebody would see an increase.
Okay.
Yep.
And if that person has that increase and they have a $200,000 home, it looks like the increase due to taking the full levy is about $100.
Yeah, that's correct.
All right, thank you.
Would there be a point where we would be able to go back to not taking CPI?
There might be. I mean, that's why we do this on a, every year by every year basis. And,
Okay.
We try and make a very realistic projection of what, we think the revenues are going to come in on. The tough part we have is that the state's unpredictable. And, we have to make decisions like this, and we're not going to know our state funding until probably June of next year. So things are a little bit out of whack with the timing on how we have to do this stuff. But, just like we approved the budget, which is our spending plan, then you approve the levy for how you're going to pay for it. But then half of this money is actually used for next year. So it's just kind of weird on how the timing works for property taxes. But yes, we review this on an annual basis. Actually, the way inflation's going right now, it looks like inflation could end the year at, maybe around 2.1, 2.2%. This last year when they did it in December last year, it was 3.4. That's the number that we use for the next year's increase. So if inflation gets down around that 2% level, the most we could ever capture next year would be around 2%. And then we just look at it at that point and decide, is it something that we need to do? Maybe circumstances change, state funding gets better, federal funding gets better, or, we're able to, rein in some expenses on other discretionary things, and we can get it back in line, and we don't have to take it in a particular year. So.
Thank you.
Do you have a feel for what the other local taxing bodies are going to do?
I do. They're all taking the
They are.
CPI, yes.
Okay.
Can I follow up on that real quick? When you say, are you saying that
School
other
districts.
School districts, okay.
Yep, school districts.
And do municipalities and other taxing bodies decide about the same time?
They will. Everybody will be deciding their levies either this month or next month.
Okay. And do you have any feel on those?
The only taxing bodies that were left that were still doing this strategy after 11 years, we've done it 11, the city's done it 10. The city is the only one that I believe is contemplating doing one more year. Every other taxing body for the last 2, 3, or even 4 years has gone back to taking CPI during these inflationary times. The city was able to avoid that along with us this whole time, and I don't know that they've made their final decision yet.
I don't believe they have.
But I can tell you, we are the only local school district that ever does this. I mean, it's been a really unique stance we've taken, and I think it's really helped grow and support families because it's kept more money in people's pockets, and we've been able to find other revenue sources. But I think Dr. Brown, his recommendation and my recommendation is steeped in the fact that we have to strike a balance here because we worry about the product we'd be able to provide without starting to increase the local revenue. And I think we've reached a place where we can, in good conscience, recommend doing this because it's on stronger home values, and the rate is still very, very competitive. In fact, probably still will be at the top of the region.
Agreed.
Mr. Stanford, was your question answered? Yes. Okay, thank you. So is there a consensus to select option 1, a flat levy, taking no CPI or new property? Ms. Joel, indicate by. You have a question too?
No, I don't have a question. My preference would be option A.
Okay, so everybody for option 1 or A, please indicate by thumbs up. So we do not have a consensus. Is there a consensus to take option 2, taking new property only? Who would like to consider something other than option 1, 2, or 3? Oh. Oh, I forgot it. Yes, I'm sorry. Is there a select option 3, taking new property and CPI? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So thank you. The consensus to select option 3. The 2020 tentative tax levy will be brought to the board for approval at the November 19th, 2024 board meeting, and then for approval, and the final 2024 tax levy will be brought to the December 17th board meeting for approval. Thank you. We will go to item D.
Excuse me, Vice President McCall.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just want to insert this really quick. So I know that it's standard practice that we do a consensus, and then we typically follow that consensus with a vote. But I just want to remind the board that a consensus does not lock you in to a vote. And I want to be very clear, because between now and then you may come across information that concerns you and you wouldn't. And I don't want any board member to feel that because they gave consensus, they have to follow up with a yes vote or vice versa. So I just want to be clear on that.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Sorry, I just wanted to add one thing also. What I was wondering is can the document that you sent, the spreadsheet that says estimated impact of property tax summary table, that had all the different property, I didn't mean that summary that you put on the board, but the one that has all the different types of properties and what the impact would be. Can that be like added to the board packet or something so that it's available to the public so they know what we're using to make our decision?
Yep.
Right, thank you.
And I didn't give a thumbs up about, I would much rather wait another year. So just so everyone know where I'm at, because you didn't see a thumb on any of them. Thank you.
Ms. Bennett.
And just to add, I also agree on waiting a year. What I hear you saying is this would be an option that you would like to proceed with, but it doesn't mean it's a last resort. It means that it would be difficult and that we don't know if there could be a balanced budget, but I'm not hearing you say that it's not possible and that other options couldn't be potentially vetted. It's very important to me to not have our families pay more money. That's very, very important to me. And so I understand that other bodies might be considering it, but I'm not, a steward of other tax-paying bodies, only this one. So it would be, in my opinion, if there's something else that could be done, that's what I would be in support of.
Okay, I just want to say that thank you to Dr. Brown and the committee for exploring all these options. And additionally, we have to remember and remind ourselves we do have bills and things to pay for. We have all these initiatives and things that we're trying to ensure, and these goals and things that we're trying to meet. So just making sure that we keep that in mind as these options were presented. I'm sorry. So moving on with the rest of the agenda, item D. The board resolution and intergovernment agreement for the land conveyance between the Board of Education and the Park District's schools, the Rockford Public Schools in the Rockford Park District, Rockford Public Schools and the Rockford Park District maintain continuous properties at various locations across the city of Rockford and Winnebago County. The agencies have regularly discussed the opportunity to right-size their respective properties. Recent discussions have focused on a property at IB at Conklin, Lathrop Elementary School, and the former Page Park property. The Rockford Park District has long maintained approximately 4.7 acres of property near IB at Conklin and approximately 5 acres near Lathrop Elementary School. In 2021, the district demolished Page Park School and attempted to sell the approximately 4.62 acres and received no offers. The Rockford Park District's Anna Page Park surrounds the former Page Park School site and on 3 sides. In the proposed exchange, the Rockford Park District will receive the former Page Park property, and the school district will receive 4.75 acres near IB at Conklin and 5 acres adjacent to Lathrop Elementary School. Are there any questions for Mr. Phillips? Mr. Carpenter.
Is that land going to be just lawn, or what will it be used for?
So the actual property at near IB at Conklin will actually become green space. So the building addition is actually going to sit north of the existing building. So really take over the green space to the north of the building. Because we're adding also rooftop there, we have to develop a detention area, which will also take green space. So the property to the west of the parking lot will actually become the green space at Conklin. Near Lathrop, the 5 acres at Lathrop will just be additional green space in that location.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. So we move on to item E, University of Illinois social worker cohort. Rockford Public Schools would like to partner with the University of Illinois to enroll up to 10 Rockford Public School District 205 employees in the online Bachelor in Social Work program through the University of Illinois School of Social Work. This will increase the total number of adequately trained and degreed professionals for the non-certified social worker position, and improve our ability to provide Tier 1 and Tier 2 interventions in general education settings. Employees will start online coursework in the spring of 2025 semester while continuing to serve in their current roles at RPS 205. Courses will be delivered through an online model in the evenings after work hours. Beginning the fall of 2026, employees will transition to a non-certified social worker position within an assigned Rockford Public School, allowing them to complete their work-based internships while also serving the needs of students within the Rockford Public Schools. Upon graduation, employees will remain in their assigned non-certified social worker position for at least 3 years post-graduation. Are there any questions regarding the University of Illinois social worker cohort? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the preview of the consent items. The items in section 7 below are the consent agenda items for the Planning and Development Committee. Are there any questions regarding the list of the preview consent items? Mrs. Bennett.
I have a question about letter F, Institute of Multisensory Education.
they're coming up to answer your question. Mr. Rhea.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, so quite a while ago, we had multiple individuals come for public comment regarding dyslexia and universal screenings and things like that. And then my understanding is there was a, I don't like task force, but a committee of individuals that got together and we're going to kind of address this concern in the building. So is this a result of that, like feedback, listening sessions, what lived experience that was provided, did that lead to this?
Yeah, so this is like the solution for special ed elementary. Excuse me. So the solution for students with IEPs, so the SPED teachers would get trained in this to help with dyslexia, yes.
Okay, so so that would be students who currently have a diagnosis in an IEP, but not necessarily addressing the concern of not every child being screened for dyslexia, correct?
So there was a dyslexia task force, and so for us, this is just for special education, but there are other things happening in general ed too. So yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Excuse me. What other things that are happening in special education?
So I'm just saying, I don't want to speak to the things outside of special education for the outcomes of the dyslexia task force. Like there were some additional screeners that were selected, things like that, but because it's like tier 2 and tier 3, like it's a different department, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Could somebody provide us an update on that? Since that's not necessarily what's being presented today, could we get an update like in our, you know, newsletter or, yes, okay, Dr. Jarrett. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other questions? Okay, well, that completes the report for the Planning and Development Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President McCall. I will now present the agenda items for Governance Committee. Board Policy 5.100 is revised to reflect training requirements for various students' medical and mental issues. There is also new language related to training requirements for trauma-informed care. Board Policy 5.210 is updated. Did you have a question on the previous?
I did, yep.
Okay, Mrs. Bennett.
When would, because there's a lot of trainings, updated language regarding training, so would these be, one, when would they start? Like, would they start this school year? And two, would they be during institute days or are they virtual? Are they, can I, just have like an overview, please?
Okay, so time-wise, many of the training requirements are already in place and the policy was revised to reflect and mirror the change in statute. So they consolidated the training requirements that were separated throughout the school code and put many of them in the same place. Anaphylaxis, many of them were already there. So they're just consolidated. It would be occurring on institute days, and the piece on the trauma-informed care starts with the 24-25 school year, and that training must take place prior to the start of student attendance.
Okay, so like on the 2 institute days before school starts? Okay.
Yes.
And then my next question is regarding the Abuse and Neglect Child Reporting Act for mandated reporter. I thought that mandated reporter had to be completed every year, and it says at least every 3 years in here.
We do it every year. It's in our annual training that we do online in SchoolWorks. And if there's anything that, oh, nobody from HR is here. I know we've done it annually in SchoolWorks, the mandated reporter training.
Okay, so since it says, so in here it says to be completed again at least every 3 years, could we have it stated to complete every year?
I can look at the language more carefully, but the recommendation would be to have the training annually for all of the new staff, because that training is for all staff, certified, non-certified, everyone.
Lori is at the podium.
So the policy reflects the statutory requirements. We go above and beyond the statutory criteria, and I would recommend sticking with the statutory criteria in the policy itself. But what we do to go above and beyond is a district decision.
So we would go above and beyond as just like a operating practice, but not have anything stating we would have to do above and beyond? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Yeah, we recommend sticking with the statutory language.
Okay. And then one more question I had. Sorry, one second. Okay, sorry, I think that's all.
So to Attorney Hoadley, I understand the recommendation for the statutory recommendation. And I know that we sometimes is concerned when we put things in policy, it may not meet it. But I think while it may be the recommendation is definitely a board policy, and it can be included that it is done annually, correct?
It can be, and my concern with doing it is if an employee misses it and then there becomes an issue because the district is sued, but the employee didn't do it that year, but has met the statutory criteria. By putting it in as a mandate, you could become liable if an employee misses that due to whatever reason. For example, if they're out on a leave of absence or whatever else may have occurred.
But can't we simply add the wording for that in the policy for that grace period should they be on leave of absence? I mean,
I apologize. There may be other reasons out there that they may have missed it. I just don't know. But that's why my recommendation is if you're going to put something in policy, you also have to enforce that policy. And then you're also telling folks, this is what we do, and if you don't do that, there could be consequences, and that's why I don't recommend changing it from the statutory mandate.
Well, the concern that I have with that is that's one of the problems. We may miss something, and we don't take it serious enough because it wasn't policy. And I think that policies are in place for a purpose, not to avoid a lawsuit, but to make sure that we are doing what we're supposed to do and everyone involved to ensure that that gets done, do it.
And just so you know, too, the board policy applies to each and every board member, too. So you would also be obligated to take those trainings every year as well.
And rightfully so. Yep. So just so you know, I recommend that it is in the policy annually, and board members can comply as well. Thank you.
Can I add something to that? Sorry.
I would just want to know, are there procedures that support the policy? So we have a stated policy, but the district actually has procedures that we follow. For example, our procedure is that we do it every year, although it's not stated in policy.
We already do have, yes, we have the procedures because we push out the mandatory trainings to all of the staff members. And so, but we don't have administrative regulations. I can't remember if there's an administrative regulation that goes with this. So I'd have to look and see.
I'm looking at the admin regs, and there's no specific admin reg related to the staff training. So the board policy 5.100, there's no specific admin reg tied to that policy. But that does not mean that there's not internal procedures in talent development department that does roll out the trainings for us each year.
Ms. Stanford, you can go ahead and then I'll go.
I would not want us to put that in the policy, the annual, because I would hate to open us up to any litigation that would be unnecessary. to expose ourselves for, just like you said, for any reason that we wouldn't need to.
Ms. Bennett?
Yeah, so I guess just a follow-up to that, and then I did remember what my other question was, so sorry to have an additional question. So my concern about mandated reporter or the annual is, one, it's a good refresher, and two, the number one professional a child discloses to is a teacher. So I think a yearly reminder is, I think it should be the first training that a teacher does every single school year. I think if it could be done monthly, I would be in support of that. It doesn't take very long. It's a very easy requirement to satisfy, and it saves children's lives. I think it's very, very important to make sure it's done annually. But my second question was regarding in the in-service training requirements, line item 5, in letter B. So regarding teen dating violence, so I know Jen Lawrence is working on kind of that whole policy and procedure. So once that procedure, or once that policy is updated, this will lend itself to that, if that makes any sense. So it talks about procedures for, so it's under domestic and sexual violence and the needs of expectant and parenting youth, conducted by persons with expertise in domestic and sexual violence and needs of expectant parenting youth. Training should include, and one of those is procedures for responding to incidents of teen dating violence that takes place at school, on school grounds, at school-sponsored events, or in vehicles used for school-provided transportation, and then board policy for teen dating violence. So if I'm understanding this correctly, training would be done regarding domestic and sexual violence and needs of expecting and parenting youth, in addition to instances of teen dating violence, which would be outlined in the board policy about teen dating violence. Is that right?
I think I'm just slow on the uptake tonight. We do have the training that is developed to comply with that. So I think you're talking about implementation versus the actual policy. I'm just not sure I'm understanding completely your question.
Ms. Bennett, may I take a stab at it?
Yeah.
So some of this language here is for forthcoming requirements. So the law is effective now, but to be implemented for next school year. So specifically for many of the sexual violence piece and student parent pieces, that is to go into effect next school year. So right now we are advising our internal staff of those requirements, health services, talent development, and they will be preparing for the implementation of these things for next school year. So the in-service trainings that would occur over the summer prior to next school year, those kinds of things, we're preparing them for implementation.
Okay, so yes, that does answer my question, but I guess a separate part of that is that the teen dating violence policy as it currently stands is being rewritten significantly.
Yes.
So this policy that we would be approving in 2 weeks would outline how teen dating violence is responded to with a policy that's currently being revised. So what I'm asking is, when the policy is revised and put in place, say January, February,
yes,
it will reference back to this.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not sure that we're revising the policy. We already revised the teen dating policy. I think what you're talking about is what is Jen Lawrence doing to implement that policy and all of the details behind that, as well as the data supporting what she's doing. The student code of conduct has been revised to incorporate teen dating violence. So I think that's what you're talking about, but I'm not, if there are additional revisions to the teen dating violence policy, and I'm not aware of any other statutory changes yet that impacts that, then we would certainly bring it forward, but we're not currently revising the policy. The policy has been revised. Now it's the implementation of the policy that Jen is doing.
Right, and I would just circle back to the starting provision of those bullet points with regard to staff development within 6 months of employment and at least once every 5 years thereafter. So that allows for that implementation time and roll up for the training.
Okay. I I think the policy is being revised, just so you know. I don't think it's made it to you yet, but the committee is revising the policy. They are creating procedures. They are creating trainings. There's a lot of work that the committee is doing. So I just don't think that the committee is far enough along that it has made it to official approval with legal. That's all. So, okay, thanks.
Okay, so before I continue on, I want to remind the board that we lead by example. And I think it sends a message to the community when we refrain from holding ourselves accountable to our families. And too often, there's a perception that our school district does not want to be held accountable for their action. And I will never forget being told that there were no consequences because there was no policy. So when I hear a statement like that, you are telling me that things can be done and we'll just have a conversation and let it go. So I want to remind us as leaders, we have a responsibility and mandated training, given the thought and consider things that we have been faced with as a district. I think that is the most responsible thing to do as leaders, and not focus on the what if or avoidance of a lawsuit. How about let's line up, let's get an alignment of what is in the best interest of our students, and let's lead by example. Now, if we need to, we can not bring this to vote on at the next meeting, or take a vote on whether mandated training should be annually. So whatever we need to do, we need to look at the mandated reporting, and then there's no administrative procedure that aligns with the policy. Does anyone see an issue with that? Mr. Carpenter?
I don't really see an issue with that. I was going to ask if it was possible to present one version of this policy with an annual requirement and one version with the 3-year requirement. One year that I think Ms. Pearson supports and Ms. Bennett support an annual requirement. Ms. Stanford said she's fine with 3-year requirement, and I don't know where everybody else stands, but I'm wondering if it's possible to.
I think I could draft it where I would say that we strive to have it presented annually or have the training taken annually, so that that's the district's makes its best efforts towards it. I think that would meet both sides of the table's desires. That's what I was thinking when I was hearing the two different opinions. So not say we will do it annually, but rather we will make our best efforts to do it, because there could be exceptions too, like I had indicated, and I don't know all of the different exceptions that could impede somebody's ability to take the training annually.
Go ahead.
One other suggestion I would have is to look at some of the trainings listed potentially individually. I can tell you that two of the last 4 communications council meetings I've had with the REA, this has been one of their top topics, is the impact of unfunded mandates on teachers. And so while we think of this as a board and management team issue, just in the time that we've been doing this, probably in the last decade or so, there have probably been 8 to 10 of these trainings that are added. And that's times teachers aren't doing other things because there's a finite amount of time that they are on the clock working in our district. And so we've received significant criticism. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't some things we should do annually. Perhaps things that are tied to the abuse of a child, for example, would be things that are non-negotiable to do every year. So I would just suggest 2 things. One would be to potentially talk to some other constituents about that, and 2, are there some things we would do every 3 years or 5 years, and some things that we do need to do annually? you may not be receiving those complaints. I'm receiving those complaints pretty consistently, that it is extremely cumbersome. We're talking about, they're already well north of 10 hours of total commitment just with what exists, and the state adds more every year. And so to exceed the state requirement is something we may want to very strategically do in certain areas for all the very good discourse we've had today. But I do want to suggest that the other side of this is not that these aren't important. It's the question of the board giving us direction on the frequency. And if we just want to universally make everything annually because the state of Illinois passes it, that's certainly a directive the board can give us. But I do want you to know that I think many of our labor partners already feel like this is a really significant burden, and it gets bigger every year. So I just want to add that context. Certainly not weighing in on my personal preference. I'll do whatever the board asks us to do and what the state of Illinois asks us to do, and we'll follow your lead. But I do want to make sure you're aware that there may be opportunities for nuance in terms of some things being annual and some things being every 3 to 5 years.
Mrs. McCall.
So my question is, so these trainings are mandated by the state, and so this would essentially mean for the teachers to be able to keep their licensure, they would have to complete these? I'm just trying to get a clarification from you. You shook your head no, so.
No, there's no licensure impact, and the mandated trainings, the state mandated trainings go for all employees from all the way from the paraprofessionals, nutrition services, all the way up to the board, as far as for the mandated reporter training goes all the way up to the board.
Right, and so these are you know, trainings that are very essential to the things that we do in the population that we serve. So if we have to do it annually, then I don't know what the problem is. Yeah, you can complain about it, but this is something when you chose to come into the field of education that you would have to do. So I think that going along with what the state says you have to do, I think that it will be, you know, behoove us to follow the state's mandates. And, you know, it's just plain and simple. You know, we have to do these. And then there's nothing else. I don't know I guess my confusion is like so people are saying, oh, I don't want to do this because it's taking too much time. Well, it doesn't matter if this is what's required by the law that you need to do it. So I guess I'm a little confused as to how this is being, I guess, told to everyone, or and how, like, why do people feel that they have an option?
Right, so they think some of it is, so the more we add on top of what the mandated ones. So when you look at all of the mandated trainings, we're from just even our paraprofessionals for all of the mandated trainings. And so this is just one component. The mandated reporter training is just one small component of all of it. But when you look at it, we're being told in some instances it's over 8 hours, and in other instances, I think, what was the last complaint, 20 some hours of mandated trainings. So as you continue to add to it, that's the complaint. But you're right, Ms. McCall, if it's mandated training, it's mandated training. So, we have to roll it out. We provide it. We continue to let people know that they haven't completed their trainings. And so it's just an ongoing thing. But when we expand the statutory criteria, that's where their complaints come in. They say, well, it's every 3 years, but now you're making us do it every year or every month or every week or whatever. When we expand upon that, that's where the complaints are coming in. But they also complain about the state mandating the trainings.
So I have maybe a suggestion. So because the state is mandating it, and it's things that we have to do, you know, to ensure that we're in compliance with everything. Maybe look at staggering when these trainings and things need to be completed. So maybe, I don't know who this would be with, HR or whoever, but maybe.
Yes, Ms. Crowder is doing that.
Ms. Crowder is actually leading that work right now.
Okay, so make sure we stagger it so it doesn't, like, okay, it's November 1st and you needed to have 15 trainings done by, November 3rd. So just make sure that it's staggered. I would stagger it and give them deadlines. So you have for the month of November, you need to complete trainings 1, 2, and 3, and then for December, just break it down so it wouldn't feel so burdensome and overwhelming. Because to me, it's a no questions asked. This is what you have to do. You need to do it and move on.
And to be clear, we're not ambiguous about the requirement that people complete them. I just wanted to raise the issue. I completely agree with you, Ms. McCall. These are not optional. It's going above the state requirement. The question I'm asking is, are there certain targeted ones that we think warrant an annual, or even more often than annual, was even suggested, whereas other things we could get by with every 2 or 3 years, if that's what the state allows us. Do we want to have that flexibility? One thing we could perhaps do is share some of the modules with you and let you kind of get a feel for what is asked, and that could help as well if we want to go above and beyond. So I'm certainly open to working with the board to help you give us direction for our employees on this. We are not questioning that we're going to follow the state mandate, to be clear. What we are questioning is, are we going to do more than the state mandate?
So again, if the board or we decide that there's more training that's needed, I don't see where the debate could come. It's the decision of the employer to identify certain trainings that the staff and everybody needs. So I've taken all of this stuff, and I'm not just speaking, from somebody who hasn't. I've had to take the mandated report or the harassment. I take 1 million of these myself throughout my career, and not one time would I even have thought to talk to my, the boss, like, oh, I don't want to take this right now, I'm doing too much. No, you can't do stuff like that. And we have to set the culture regarding things that are mandated and things that we don't have any wiggle room on. So when you're saying we could do it for maybe 1 or 2 years, no, pick how you want to do it, and that's the standard. Okay, that's all my comments. Thank you.
I would just add that when Dr. Jarrett says, I'm not disagreeing with anything that was said, I just want to reaffirm what Dr. Jarrett indicated about an unfunded mandate, because we do get requests from different employees and bargaining units with regard to paid time to do the training outside of their regularly set schedule. So there is a financial impact to it as well. Just adding that to the discussion.
And just remember that when we're talking about how we're going to do the budget for next year. So I'm just saying, it's all coming full circle. So we have to make sure that we have all of these things in mind when you're making your decisions on what to vote for. And that's it.
Mrs. Bennett.
Just to clarify, for face law, when Ms. McCall asked if, any of these laws have anything to do with like losing licenses and things like that, face law could result in somebody losing their teaching license. So if a teacher is suspected of another teacher sexually abusing a child or mistreating a child and they do not report, they could lose their license. So just to make sure that that's a clarifying point. Same thing with mandated reporter. If you are a mandated reporter and you do not report as your mandate, you could get legal fines, you could get jail time. There are consequences to not following these, which is utmost importance to continue to train individuals on these laws. And so when I was talking about every year to do the training, I was specifically talking about mandated reporter, Aaron's Law, and face law, just to make sure that everybody was clear on what I was talking about. So, and if there's anybody that has a question about why to do those, please contact me in terms of constituents.
So I certainly appreciate everything I heard. Mandating, the state of Illinois is the state of Illinois. Rockford is Rockford. The challenges that RPS 205 have been confronted with is ours. Okay? And if it requires an extra hour of pay, then you put a time frame on the time that is allotted for pay to complete training. It's work related. They should get paid for it. Secondly, speaking of the budget, we can always look at if mandated training is going to negatively impact our budget, then we need to look at our spending. If we cannot afford to pay for mandated training, then we need to take a look at our spending. We need to take a look at, the newest things that's coming up and how we're going to rearrange what we need to rearrange. But I can't stress enough that I strongly encourage that we do mandated reporting annually. Vice President McCall gave a wonderful example on how this can happen. Just simply stagger it. And I, too, can empathize with I don't even work with children. I don't serve children. I do serve families, but I have to complete mandated training annually. And we serve our children. And I have so much confidence in our teachers and wanting to protect our students and have a voice for our students that they certainly wouldn't mind doing mandated training annually. Thank you. Anything else on 5.100? Okay. Board Policy 5.210 is updated in response to the school code addressing teacher resignation and potential licensure sanctions when a teacher fails to resign in accordance with the requirement in the statute. Are there any questions? Mrs. Bennett.
I just have one question. If this policy is voted and approved on later in the month, I know that this has gone out in the What You Need to Know newsletter, and I know that REA has provided this to their members, but could this, if approved, be sent out again just to ensure that all teachers are on the same understanding that this is the current policy moving forward, no exception? Okay, thank you.
Excuse me. We are now on to governance consent items. Are there any questions? If not, in regards to, I want to make sure. So we know that the joint conference is coming up, and I have asked Mrs. Haley to be the delegate for this year, and she accepted. Did you?
Oh, how was that decision made?
Like it was last year. Didn't I ask you last year?
I thought there was you sent out a question to everyone to see who was interested, is what my memory was.
Is someone else interested? So the point that I did that, I remember the meeting, and I shared that I had that experience, and I will open it up to anyone else that was interested. Again, I guess the information came in a little later than usual. So if there's someone else interested, we can certainly have that conversation, or we can continue in the rotation. But Mrs. McCall?
Just want to clarify. So as a delegate, that means you're going to come back and report out from key workshops or anything attended. Is that correct?
So this is the delegate for the General Assembly. So did you get your email regarding the resolutions?
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Oh, so she's going to report our vote or something, or what?
Yeah, so we should have reviewed the resolutions. Mm-hmm. And so IASB have indicated what they adopted, but it doesn't mean that we are limited on what we can vote for. They also made a webinar available if anyone had an opportunity to watch it. It could be designated to an individual to be the delegate. You can vote on everything or just what's adopted. The individual representing the board is there and can make a decision to vote as well. Did anyone watch the webinar? You still have time to do it. But if you have any questions or discussion about the resolutions, then now is the time to discuss it.
So my comment was really just based on for public information as to what the duties of the delegate are and how they will be reporting back to the board. So
well, I believe Paul reported his experience. He will report. We're all going. We can definitely share, but this is again specifically for the General Assembly. Now, again, if there's someone else interested, I'm confident that everyone on the board will have an opportunity to be a delegate to the General Assembly.
I do want to point out that I am not married to this commitment, and if anybody else would like to do it, or if we should actually have a more formal process, that I'm totally open to that.
Mrs. Bennett?
I don't have a comment about that. I'm open to whatever. I don't want to partake in this, but I do want to share my opinions on a few of the items that are up for not support, and I just wanted to voice my concern, so I don't know if we want to talk about with Ms. Haley's part first.
Yeah, so Miss Stanford, are you interested in being a delegate to General Assembly? Mr. Carpenter, I'm going to skip you for the sake that you had an opportunity last year. I've spoke with Grant, and he's not interested in attending the joint conference. I did not speak to Mrs. McCall, and I'm not sure Mrs. McCall have all the information that she should have, but if she's interested, please speak up now. And Mrs. Haley says she's not married to it, so.
I have the information, and I'm prepared to weigh in on how she should vote, but I do not want to be the delegate.
Okay.
And I'd definitely be interested in hearing everybody else's opinion on the resolutions that will be presented.
Absolutely. That's what we're here for in this moment, and that's what we're gonna discuss, starting with Ms. Bennett.
Okay, so I am in support of all of the resolutions that have been put up for adopting. Number 9, face law EHR for current employees was one that is the committee recommends do not adopt. However, I would recommend it would be adopted. So does anybody have questions about it, or do I explain my reason, or yes, explain my reason? Okay. Oh, sorry, Paul said yes. Mr. Carpenter said yes.
Mr. Carpenter is not currently leading.
Sorry.
Mr. Carpenter is not currently leading governance committee. So I'm going to hear you, Ms. Bennett, after I share, just for the sake of public knowledge, the resolution committee analysis. Okay? The resolution committee analysis, committee members determined that conducting EHRS, which is in regards to the faith law, for current employees could cause confusion and pose legal and collective bargaining challenges for school districts. Given these challenges, these employment decisions are best left to each local district and its attorneys. So give your concerns and reasoning, Mrs. Bennett.
So I think So currently, the audit check is done on new hires only. However, I think checking all current staff to be another way to ensure safety of children. We have had, as well as several other school districts all across the country, different individuals who we have later found out have done some very inappropriate things. So if there are any additional layers, levels, checks, and balances that we can put in place, I think that that is what we should do.
Okay, and I just want to clarify that EHR is employment history review. You know, we use acronyms a lot. So who's interested in supporting this resolution? Ms. Sanford? Mrs. Haley?
Same for me, what the committee recommends.
I've heard from Mrs. Bennett. Mr. Carpenter?
Just to be clear, there's, sorry, I was looking, there's two different faiths law resolutions.
She said number 9, right?
Yes.
Yes, but.
Yeah, if you go back.
Okay, thank you.
I have it here. There's number 4, Faith's Law Centralized State Agency for EHR. So you have number 4 and you have number 9.
The first one, number 4, is for a centralized database for the health, or for the employment history reviews. The second one would be to do these on current employees, not just new employees.
All right, thank you. I would agree that we should support that.
I agree that we should support it as well. But there's just 3 of us that, what did Vice President?
I agree that we should support it.
Okay, so Ms. Haley, we're going to support number 9, Faith's Law EHR.
I think Mr. Schubert could still weigh in if he wanted to. Or I know he's not going to the, or I don't know if that's why you didn't
Mr.
ask.
Carpenter, I appreciate your input, and Mr. Schubert is more than welcome to weigh in and hit his light and chime in at any point. Please do.
I'll go with the committee.
You have that, Ms. Haley? Okay, thank you. Any other? Mrs. Bennett?
Yes, number 10. So for criminal background check, the committee said do not adopt, and I would be in support of adopting.
Okay, so that is criminal background check. Well, I think this is worth, and I also could have shared this on the other note. So the district rationale, there is a current law that states that no school board member can be convicted of an infamous crime. However, there is no oversight that is making sure that this is completed. Our resolution makes sure that there is oversight on this law. The resolution's committee analysis, the committee agreed that it is critical that school board members maintain the highest ethical standard. However, committee members determined that background checks for school board candidates create a different election standard for school board members as compared to other elected officials. Also, it could cause financial and procedural challenges for potential board members. These challenges could deter qualified candidates from running for school board? Ms. June, Ms. Stanford?
Well, don't we already run background checks? For candidates.
Not for a candidate, but if you're appointed, there is a background check. If not, then please explain why I had to do a background check.
Allegedly.
So what we do in our district, because if you're convicted of a crime as a school board member, there's nothing statutorily that would prevent you from serving as a school board member. So for example, in the state of Illinois, they've had people who have been convicted of infamous crimes such as child abuse and so forth, and still served as a board member. What we have done in this district is we don't say who can and can't serve as a school board member, because that's absolutely not in our control. But in order to get a badge to get into our school, we do require you to undergo the background check once you are serving as a school board member. And for those who choose not to get the background check, you just don't get a badge that allows you to enter into the schools. So that's what we've done in the district.
So if somebody were to not agree or not pass a background check and they needed to be in a school or doing a school tour or something like that, would there be safety planning or something put in place to that person is never left alone inside a building?
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
So the committee is saying that they don't want to impose.
They did not adopt.
I don't think I would agree with that one either.
Mrs. Haley?
Me either. I don't think I agree with that. I think that anybody who does the election and is elected should have a background check.
Mrs. Bennett?
So, but what we were just told is that you wouldn't have to do a background check. So if you were elected, you would not do a background check, but there could be people who were convicted of crimes that wouldn't do the background check, correct?
I haven't read the resolution as to what they're trying to do, but I thought you had indicated that it's applicants for boards would undergo the criminal background check. And so currently there are no criminal background checks on any elected official position that I'm aware of as far as school boards are concerned.
Okay, let's pause for one moment. Statement of resolution. Be it resolved that Illinois Association of School Boards shall request that Illinois legislator revise no, wait a minute. That's not it. One moment. Criminal background check. Be it resolved that Illinois Association of School Boards shall require all school board candidates to have a criminal background check before they submit their petition. It is each candidate's responsibility to get a criminal background check from the Regional Office of Education. It will be the candidate's responsibility to contact the ROE to make the appointment and acquire the paperwork needed. It is up to the Regional Office of Education to get the results of the background check for the candidate. The background check may be emailed, picked up, or mailed to the candidate. It may be the ROE decision on how they distribute the result. It is the candidate's responsibility to turn in the background check to their prospective clerk at the time they turn in their signatures. It is on the prospective clerk to make sure that the candidate has no infamous crimes on their report before they are put on the ballot. Infamous crimes include felony, bribery, perjury, domestic violence, and sex offender. Now, therefore, it will be resolved on how criminal background checks are performed on school board members.
I want to change my vote because they're saying they don't want to approve this, right? I think any more front-end work on candidates is going to deter people. We already have a problem getting people wanting to run for the board. This is one more thing that they would have to go out of their way to get done. And if they're elected, RPS is going to run their background check anyway to get the badge. So I think that it would be silly to make them do it up front.
Mrs. Haley? Oh, I'm sorry, Vice President. I'm going to come around to you. My apologies.
Although it would be additional work for a candidate to complete a background check, anybody who's running for school board where they're going to be around children, I think it's reasonable to request it. So that's where I stand.
Okay, Mrs. Bennett?
So not only the badge being a concern, that's fine if somebody were to be supervised, but I mean, we see very sensitive information. We create every single policy that outlines how to protect children, what policies are in place, and I mean, all kinds of different ways that if somebody were convicted of crimes that involve children, I just think the public should know if there were multiple candidates and some had committed crimes against children and some had not, that they would be informed in their decision making, and also to not have children who have perpetrated against children having somebody govern on the board, and any due diligence ahead of time, I think just keeps our kids safe. So.
Mr. Carpenter?
Thank you. The submitting district's rationale for this says that there is a current law that states no school board member can be convicted of an infamous crime, but there's no oversight to make sure that is completed. So I don't know if that's, so I think that this could be rewritten to say that upon election, then a background check has to be done, and if they have been convicted of an infamous crime, then they can't be sworn in. That's what I think would make sense. Then you aren't putting it on the front end of the candidate.
Then it's not just about the badge, then it's your service entirely.
Right, so I guess as it's written, I would support not adopting this.
Okay. Mr. Schubert, I do not want to overlook you.
I would agree with Paul. I would not adopt this.
Vice President McCall?
Yes. So I have a couple of things that I find issue with this. First is this is not a requirement for any other elected position or elected office. Having been a person who served in a different capacity as an appointed or elected official, this was not something that I had to complete in order to run or be appointed for something. I feel that we as a district, we kind of have our little fail-safe already, because you do have to do your background check in order to come in and be sworn, not to be sworn in, but all those formalities or whatever. My second thing is, as a former county clerk, how can we put this type of demand on another entity as far as having, it seems to me like it's kind of passing the puck. You're having the clerk has to receive the background check and then review it and say, that they can't be put on a ballot. And I think that decision should not fall on a clerk. So I would agree with not to adapt, and I also would like to say that I feel that we have kind of a catch-all. There's going to be points where a background check is going to be needed to serve in its capacity. So my second question is, what happens? Like, what will we do if a person is elected and then they can't perform? I mean, they fail like the background check. Then what do? You can't unelect them. So I'm thinking like, so when we're trying to adopt these things, we have to keep in mind, like, it seems to me like it's just an idle threat, like, oh, you're going to have to do a background check or whatever, but then they get in and they fail the background check, they can't be unseated.
So
those are my thoughts.
So, these are very valid points. I think that having gone through 2 elections, it can be burdensome to take on another task. So I'm very empathetic to that. But I'm stronger on the example of leadership. And RPS 205 is sometimes in a world of its own, and that's just a harsh reality. And no, there's no other candidate that of any other board that I'm aware of that requires background check. It's interesting. I wonder, now that I think of other boards, but it looks like there is more that says not to adopt. But Mr. Carpenter brings forth a good point on how it is written. And I think that how it is written makes a difference. I support that it should be. I don't feel that it is economically feasible, or you have to look at the time frame as well. And from the point of turning in how would all this line up? So because there's other details that may be missing, I would go along with not supporting, not adopting, due to the language and the demand. I don't disagree with it should be done, but it is not fully mapped out that would meet possible deadlines with the details associated with the candidates' work. Any other resolutions? Mrs. Bennett, were those the only 2 that? Any other questions? Mr. Carpenter?
I had a resolution that I wanted to comment on or voice an opinion on. It's number 6.
Mm-hmm.
It's polling place. And I guess the current requirement is that all schools have to be closed on election day. And this resolution would say that this resolution is asking the legislature to change the law to say that if you're not a polling place, then you wouldn't have to close the school on election day. And the resolutions committee recommends to adopt that. I think that should not be adopted. I think it's important to close schools on election day, whether they're a polling place or not, because it gives an opportunity for the school to be a polling place. And if it's, and I think schools should be, or good opportunities they're good locations for polling places in a lot of communities. And so that's why I would recommend to not adopt this.
Okay. Ms. Vice President McCall?
I would agree with what Paul has stated. And additional, just remember too that, we have to have options for our high school students who are eligible to vote, to exercise their right to vote on election day. So I would agree with Mr. Carpenter.
Mrs. Bennett?
I agree as well.
Mr. Schubert?
I agree.
Mrs. Haley?
I agree.
Ms. Stanford, I don't know what was the problem with your last name today, but.
Is this concerning all elections or just when it's national elections?
So,
Like the April board elections, we don't close schools for the April election day, just national elections. Okay, then I would also support it.
So
General, not the
Every 2
primary.
years, yes.
Yeah, right.
the even year November elections.
So we are not in agreement with adopting this. Ms. Haley, do you?
Say that again. What, is this just for the gubernatorial? I didn't read it.
For the November election every 2 years.
Okay.
Oh, okay, anyone else? Any other resolutions that concerns anyone? Okay, Ms. Fromm, can you confirm when you received the resolution?
I'll check in my email when we got them.
Okay, because I know last year we got them late, and I just want to make
Yeah,
sure.
I think we got them between board meetings, you know.
Okay,
so-
yeah. Okay, that's worth a conversation. Okay, so that, we have the resolution. Mr. Carpenter, are you, okay. All right. We don't have any petitions for public comments. And so I'll take a motion in a second to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you for your patience and have a good night.